the great swordsman of Marvel. Welcome back, brave explorers of impossible worlds. We are excited to have you here to continue this odyssey together. Before we continue, everything you'll hear is pure fiction, so please don't try to replicate combat techniques at home. This wonderful story and all its rights belong to its brilliant original author. We are only the messengers of entertainment. Want another dose of adventure? Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single chapter, and if you can't wait, our Patreon has exclusive surprises you'll love. Chapter 301 Turbid. These words struck everyone like a hammer blow to their hearts. The atmosphere grew heavy, and no one uttered a word. Gentlemen, Lewis spoke first. Now that things have reached this point, we must consider the most dangerous scenario. The time has come for humanity's survival. He needed to re-infuse the power he had given us into these people's minds. There was no other way, it was the only conceivable solution. What do you want to say? All eyes turned to Lewis. Various expressions filled his gaze, some doubtful, some panicked, some calm. Everyone had their own principles, and now, it was crucial to unify their fundamental thoughts. If we determine that a collision with Jupiter is unavoidable, Lewis declared, then I have decided to send the space station away, taking with it all the human genes and data stored on it, to wander the universe. Lewis's statement immediately caused a huge uproar. This truly was the worst-case scenario. It meant abandoning everyone on Earth. For a long time, humanity has believed in sacrificing the individual for the greater good. But now, it is the greater good that must be sacrificed for the sake of all humanity. The fate of Earth ultimately rests in the hands of the humans on the space station. Agreed. After a long silence, people began to speak, expressing their agreement with this extreme view. Indeed, if it really came to that, this was the last resort. Humanity must not perish, it must survive in this vast universe. Judging by the energy reserves of the space station, it might be able to hold out until they find a new settlement. After all, everyone on the space station is among the elite of humanity, possessing the power to change the world. Inside the space station, when Moss announced the start of hibernation, Liu Peqiang was the first to sense something was amiss. The space station, which had always acted as a guide, did have regular hibernation periods, but those were merely for shift changes. But now, there was no time for the usual hibernation rotation. The fact that everyone was being put into hibernation meant that something enormous had happened outside. Lieutenant Colonel Liu Peqiang, please return to your hibernation pod immediately for hibernation. Moss's voice rang out again, urging Liu Peqiang to enter the hibernation pod. Moss, what's happening outside? Tell me quickly. Liu Peqiang stared directly at Moss, his face broking no argument, leaving no room for negotiation. Lieutenant Colonel Liu Peqiang, this is just a normal space station hibernation. Please don't have too many doubts. Hibernation is about to begin today, Moss solemnly warned again. There's a problem, definitely a problem. Liu Peqiang had a strong feeling that he couldn't enter the hibernation pod and had to stay outside. Moss, I request to connect to Liu Qi's phone. Sorry, the communication signal is temporarily off. Lieutenant Colonel Liu Peqiang, please enter the hibernation pod immediately. Moss completely ignored Liu Peqiang. At this moment, everyone except Liu Peqiang was inside the pod, waiting for Moss's next move. Moss, I request to connect to President Lewis, the leader of the International United Government. Liu Peqiang stared coldly at Moss, his expression determined to see what would happen next. Lieutenant Colonel Liu Peqiang, I'm sorry, your communication privileges have been disabled. Please enter the hibernation pod to hibernate. Moss blocked all of Liu Peqiang's questions. Suddenly, a large amount of smoke billowed out, hibernation gas. Moss, you're defecting. Liu Peqiang immediately covered his mouth, glaring angrily at Moss, and turned to leave. He couldn't stay here any longer, otherwise, he would become a fish on a chopping block, at Moss's mercy. Liu Peqiang, would take his own destiny into his own hands, and also Liu Qi's destiny into his own. But just as Liu Peqiang was about to leave, the door was already locked. Moss had used methods that violated the 3 laws of robotics to put Liu Peqiang into hibernation. Moss, you? Liu Peqiang couldn't continue speaking. The hibernation gas had already invaded his body, numbing his senses and body. In a daze, Liu Peqiang lost his last bit of consciousness and collapsed onto the floor. Moss departed as well. Its mission was complete. Now, it only needed to carry the space station through the universe and find a new settlement. Though difficult, It was the only way for humanity on Earth to survive. The most desperate thing was to wait until everything was over before telling the people on the space station. Telling them the truth now would only lead to reason being clouded by emotion, resulting in the worst possible decision. Inside the cave, Xiao Yi emerged calmly, despite the extremely difficult task suddenly placed upon him. When he reached the outskirts of Chagan Lake, he found that nearly half the people were gone, with only 2 or 3 teams remaining. Xiao Yi, perhaps you can explain the cause of the earthquake. The white-haired old man stared intently at Xiao Yi, pressing him with his powerful aura. He knew he was no match for Xiao Yi now, but based on his current wild guesses, Xiao Yi was definitely the one in the know. Xiao Yi remained unmoved by the white-haired old man's pressure, calmly walking up to him. The earthquake was likely caused by something inside the cave, but now is not the time to blame me. The most important thing is to consider how to prevent humanity's extinction. The remaining soldiers looked bewildered. It seemed they hadn't received any orders from their superiors. After all, humanity's elite were still racking their brains for a solution, not telling the masses as long as there was a sliver of hope. It would be absurd to be defeated by internal chaos before external factors could destroy them. We will get through this. You just need to tell me, if it was caused by something inside, can it be resolved by something inside? The white-haired old man's eyes held a glimmer of hope. If Xiao Yi could solve the problem through something inside the cave, that would be the best outcome. No, Xiao Yi answered calmly. These 2 words weighed heavier than Mount Tai, pressing down on the white-haired old man's heart, almost suffocating him. In other words, humanity had to solve this greatest predicament on its own. I will help you, Xiao Yi spoke again. These words, like an oasis suddenly appearing in the desert, instantly rekindled the white-haired old man's confidence. Currently, Xiao Yi was already among the most powerful humans, arguably the only strong man on Earth. His unparalleled super strength was unmatched. If Xiao Yi could lend a hand and help overcome this predicament, it would be much easier. Take me to headquarters. Yi patted the white-haired old man's shoulder, pulling him back from his thoughts. And them, they don't need to stay here anymore. They have no value. Xiao Yi turned to look at the still bewildered warriors and suddenly felt a pang of pity for them. Humanity's extinction was imminent, yet they knew nothing. When they finally couldn't hold on any longer, and the news was leaked, one could imagine the devastating impact. It would absolutely crush a person. Perhaps this was the fate of the lowest strata of society. They seemed to control their lives, their initiative, and their freedom, but ultimately, they were still just a part of the lowest rung of human society. Those at the top could control everything, releasing the information they wanted you to know, while what they didn't want you to know, you would never know. This is perhaps the tragedy of the lower classes. As for the Chagan Lake region, there's truly no need to hold on any longer. There's a special rift inside. Who knows what drastic changes will occur once we resolve the external situation? The plan to set up planetary engines here really needs to be abandoned. You all return to your respective units. Be prepared at any time. There will be a mission soon. The white-haired old man dismissed the assembly. He then took Xiao Yi, boarded an armored vehicle, and sped towards headquarters. Unable to reach. Unable to reach. Unable to reach. The computers emitted a unified message, indicating that all the ideas of these human geniuses were impossible even on paper. They had failed. They couldn't devise a way to avoid the Jupiter impact. It can be announced. Lewis looked at the human geniuses before him, mired in frustration and despair. He knew they had tried their best, but reality was even more cruel, directly destroying them. No one typed anymore, no one thought anymore, because they had already given their all. There was no way, absolutely no way, except death. A gloomy atmosphere permeated the crowd. They had already given up. Moss, start the global broadcast. Lewis gave Moss his final instructions. Yes, sir. Moss was an excellent executor, and it had already calculated that there was no way to escape Jupiter. Earth was doomed. Buzz. Buzz. Globally, all hot communication devices went offline, emitting a buzzing sound. Then, Moss completely took over the electromagnetic wave channels. Here's a global report. Due to Jupiter's immense gravity, Earth has no chance of escaping its pull and will collide with Jupiter in 10 hours, ultimately destroying it. These last 10 hours will be your last moments, so please go home. Everything is coming to an end. Moss's words sent shockwaves through the human world like an unprecedented flood, engulfing the entire planet. All the unsuspecting, ordinary people, before they could even cry, were overwhelmed by boundless sorrow and rushed home. In their final moments, they needed to be with their families. Ah. Fuck the hell. God, fuck your mother. Some of the strangers cursed and pointed at the sky, venting their inner pain. Others remained silent, their eyes cloudy and devoid of any color. Chapter 302 Destructive Power. At this moment of despair, Xiaoyi arrived. Thanks to the white-haired old man's incredible speed, the two successfully reached headquarters from the Chagan Lake region in just 1 hour. Where is President Lewis? I need to see him, the white-haired old man roared as soon as he entered headquarters. He had heard Moss's broadcast on the way. But things were different now. Xiaoyi was here, he was the unknown X-Factor, and he could very well turn everything around. Therefore, humanity couldn't give up, and Blue Star couldn't be abandoned. Wait, there's still a chance. The white-haired old man shouted. Upon hearing this, everyone showed extreme skepticism, especially the human elites, who were visibly disdainful. As the most elite beings among humans, they represented the pinnacle of human wisdom, holding the ultimate authority over technology. The white-haired old man and his group knew this. After all, they often met at headquarters, though one was a man whose martial prowess had reached the pinnacle of humanity. In terms of science and technology, they undoubtedly held an absolute advantage. Specialization is key, and only they could lead the way in technology. So when they heard the white-haired old man shout there's still a chance, their initial surprise turned into unparalleled anger. This statement completely questioned their professionalism and their knowledge. For a mere brute to presume to defeat them in science was utterly insulting and contemptible. Xiaoyi, President Lewis, although you may not know him yet, with him here, our chances of victory increase by 70%, the white-haired old man said, pointing to Xiaoyi beside him, offering the most sincere advice. But perhaps this was still an underestimation. After all, Xiaoyi's strength was beyond his comprehension, possibly reaching unimaginable levels. Like a galaxy in a vast universe, immensely large and almost impossible to fully fathom, Xiaoyi was now like a boundless galaxy, or even more expansive than the Milky Way. Can he really accomplish this impossible task? President Lewis took a deep breath, looking at Xiaoyi with an extremely calm expression. Even the most brilliant minds on Earth couldn't calculate a way to escape Jupiter. How could one person possibly do it? This was completely beyond Lewis's comprehension, or rather, it was simply not within his realm of thought. He can do it, absolutely can, I swear on my life. The white-haired old man was extremely solemn, his right hand clenched into a fist, and he slammed it against his left hand, placing it on his particularly burning heart. Such a loyal and courageous act made Lewis feel a slight sense of relief. A sliver of expectation even rose within him, but it was ultimately just a hidden thought, or perhaps a mere fantasy. Like a straw pulled out of the water and placed in reality, it was as fragile as a broken stalk, easily blown down and snapped by a gentle breeze. President Lewis, don't listen to his nonsense. Go home and reunite with your family now. Don't waste our time, one of the engineers stepped forward and shouted with utter disdain. He didn't want to waste any more time here, family was the most important thing now. Yes, President Lewis, let us go home quickly, this is simply not feasible, let us go. In an instant, spurred on by the man from before, the headquarters became extremely noisy, with everyone shouting. At this moment, they lived only for themselves. Their hearts devoid of anyone else. Morality, humanity, all were thrown to the back of their minds. Of everyone present, only the white-haired old man still supported Xiaoyi. Everyone became restless, shouting, angrily raising their halberds, their feet stomping on the ground with a thunderous roar, making it seem as if the ground itself trembled. Perhaps this is human nature, always suppressed by morality and law. Without these constraints, humanity is as fragile as a piece of paper, easily punctured, easily collapsed. This is why they haven't achieved transcendence, their thoughts remain stuck in a state of low tranquility. Just as the situation was about to spiral out of control, Xiaoyi suddenly roared, his voice like a resounding bell, piercing through the clouds, causing everyone's eardrums to vibrate. The sound of the vibrating pipe rang out, and people covered their ears, their faces contorted in pain. Only then did everyone realize that Xiaoyi's strength might indeed be, as the white-haired old man had said, at a point where he could change this seemingly inescapable situation. Since you've stopped, let me say a few words. Xiaoyi slowly walked to the front of the crowd, looking down at them with the air of a ruler. I don't want to say too many grand words or empty promises. Blue Star is our home, our only home, a necessary condition for the continuation of humanity. That is, Blue Star must exist. So today, I hope you can help me, help Blue Star escape Jupiter, and once again enter the universe to wander." His words were extremely calm, without much rambling, only a glimmer of hope, hoping that everyone present could realize this. "Everyone, I also hope that you can believe in me. We've been together for so many years, sharing life and death for so long. You all know my character, right? I just want to say, believe in SYE, he really can do it." The white-haired old man stepped forward at the right time to support SYE. Instantly, everyone's expressions changed slightly. Perhaps it was Ye's words that had an effect. Blue Star truly was a necessary condition for the continuation of humanity. No matter what, they couldn't abandon Blue Star, they had to survive and perish with their only home. Or perhaps the white-haired old man's words moved them, reminding them of their interactions with him many years ago. Just as he said, the white-haired old man was sincere and never joked about important matters. Therefore, this series of subtle changes became indispensable factors, altering everyone's original opinions. "Damn it, we're going to die anyway, might as well take a gamble." Someone took the lead in supporting SYE, setting a perfect example. Soon after, more people began to believe in SYE and wanted to give it a shot. I don't care anymore, I'll just try my best. I'm all alone now, if Blue Star is gone, I have nothing left, damn it." Soon, most people set an example, standing on SYE's side. They wanted to do their last effort to save Blue Star. "The rest of you, you can go back now. There's no need to stay here any longer. Go back and reunite with your families," President Lewis said solemnly. No one would force them to stay. Everyone has their own ambitions, those who want to stay and help will stay, and forcing those who don't want to stay will only backfire. They dispersed. The remaining people quickly left headquarters after hearing President Lewis's words. "The rest of you, tell me your best solution, and then tell me exactly what's missing." SYE didn't waste any time and spoke immediately. With that order, without Lewis needing to say anything more, everyone now regarded SYE as their leader. "The best solution calculated so far is to gather all the energy from the small planetary engines in the lowest region, and then ignite them when Earth and Jupiter are closest. The resulting energy shockwave can reach 50 million kilometers, but it still won't reach Jupiter. There's still nearly 20 million kilometers to go. We've also tried gathering more firestones to the lowest region, but given the remaining time and various unforeseen road conditions and earthquakes, the possibility is only 0%. The head of the team stepped forward and presented this disheartening solution. It was just a hair's breadth away, but the remaining time was completely insufficient. It was like a mirage, visible but impossible to touch. "I understand," SYE nodded. The situation was extremely clear. Relying on fuel to bridge the final 20 million kilometers was impossible. However, the remaining 20 million kilometers don't necessarily require the fuel of the flint. There are other ways to achieve this. "Is there a way?" One of the bespectacled men looked at SYE with hopeful eyes. At headquarters, here, only SYE, whom they trusted, could bring them a glimmer of hope. "Yes," SYE said calmly. "Really? You can do it? Wow. We've got it." Everyone was instantly overjoyed. Although SYE only made a verbal promise and didn't provide a concrete plan or evidence, in this pitch-black despair, this verbal promise was enough to excite them to tears. President Lewis, standing nearby, also felt a surge of excitement, but compared to the jubilation of the others, he remained remarkably calm, perhaps restrained by his own reason. To be elected president of the international coalition government required extraordinary composure. After all, this was during the Wandering Earth project. Every decision made had to be made in a state of absolute rationality. Just like Lewis's previous order to us, even if it meant abandoning everyone on Earth, humanity had to be saved so that it could continue to exist in the universe via space stations. This absolute rationality was the powerful reason why Lewis was elected president. No one else could be as unaffected by human emotions as him and make the right choice. "So, what is the specific plan?" the white-haired old man suddenly asked. Time stopped the noisy crowd, everyone staring intently at SYE. After the initial excitement, the people's inner repression had been completely released, so they could calm down more quickly. "I will use my own body to become the bridge for the last 20 million kilometers, SYE said calmly. His words, devoid of any emotional fluctuation, seemed to tell everyone that this was not fake, but absolutely true. These words left everyone bewildered, completely unable to understand SYE's words. "Are you going to sacrifice yourself?" But that's impossible. How could an ordinary human like you have the energy equivalent to several thousand atomic bombs? Lewis remained calm and composed, stroking his chin and looking directly at Xiao. Who said I'm just an ordinary human? Did they give you the information that I survived a nuclear explosion? Yi grinned, exuding a mysterious aura. Everyone was stunned, utterly shocked. Survived a nuclear explosion? What did that even mean? It was completely impossible. How could anyone withstand the destructive power of a nuclear explosion? In human history, nearly 120 years ago, 2 atomic bombs were enough to destroy 2 Long Islands and kill nearly 200,000 people. And now, the power of atomic bombs has more than doubled. This is humanity's continuous improvement of its capabilities in the face of adversity, to prevent encountering unsolvable situations during space travel. Chapter 303 Lobster Monster. The goal is so that one day, when encountering other advanced civilizations in the universe, they won't be ants held in someone else's hands, but rather powerful rebels capable of taking a bite out of them. After all, humanity's ultimate goal is to survive and thrive in the universe. For this goal, as long as they live, they will never give up. Xiao Yi is right. He is indeed no longer an ordinary human. His strength is already above ours, or rather, beyond our dimension, the white-haired old man explained. Everyone was even more astonished. Who is this white-haired old man? One of the top combatants on Earth, representing the strongest military force on the planet. If even he said this, then the credibility of his statement would rise countless levels. Or rather, it could be directly confirmed that Xiao Yi possessed strength unimaginable to ordinary people. The ability gained from the nuclear explosion. At this moment, Lewis could only rely on common sense from science fiction movies to examine Xiao Yi's abilities. As for why I have such strength, you could say it's a little secret of mine, so I won't go into further detail. In short, the most urgent objective now is to help Blue Star escape Jupiter's gravity and continue to survive. Xiao Yi's words brought everyone back to their senses. Yes, the main objective now is not to discuss why Xiao Yi possesses such terrifying power, nor to judge him, but to solve the problem of Jupiter. If there are no problems, take all the necessary equipment and all the flints in headquarters, and then set off for Lois. Xiao Yi spoke again, completely prepared. Yes, everyone shouted in unison. In that instant, everyone was filled with energy, because a fiery red sun had risen in their hearts, a light illuminating their path forward, a source of hope supporting them. Soon, everyone was ready, even President Lewis was prepared to go along. President, you don't need to go, do you? The white-haired old man said somewhat tactfully. President Lewis immediately interrupted the white-haired old man's attempt to continue, saying, I know you think I won't be of any help, and might even be a burden on the road, holding you back. But believe me, in a critical moment, my calm judgment will definitely help you. Calm judgment, indeed, as Lewis said, he could make the best and most correct choice in the most critical moment. Perhaps, it really was possible to bring President Lewis along, and judging from his lack of any intention to back down. Let's take him. Yi hesitated for a moment, but finally decided to bring Lewis. As time went on, the gravitational pull of Jupiter would definitely increase, so many unpredictable difficulties and dangers would certainly occur along the way. If, as Lewis said, he possessed absolutely powerful judgment, it might play a decisive role. Now, divide into groups. Those who cannot fight will sit in the middle car, those who can fight will lead the way, and some will stay behind for protection. Let's go. At Xiao Yi's command, everyone boarded the vehicles one after another. The armored vehicles stationed at headquarters were all top of the line, their performance far superior to the others. President Lewis, you'll also be with us, leading the way. We might need you sometime, the white-haired old man called out, taking Lewis along as well as the vanguard. Okay, Lewis nodded. When he decided to follow, he disregarded his own life. Helping Xiao Yi and the others safely reach the Lois region was his only mission. The armored vehicles roared, and a train, with a detonation of its engines, instantly shot out of headquarters, speeding towards the endless snowstorm outside. This trip to the Lois region would be more dangerous than ever before. The ever-increasing gravity of Jupiter would continuously pull on Earth, eventually tearing it apart. Therefore, many difficulties would inevitably arise along the way, and the deaths of a large number of people were unavoidable. Xiao Yi couldn't guarantee how many of the people in these vehicles would survive, but since they had already placed their lives on his shoulders, he would do everything in his power to ensure their survival. The vehicles sped on, quickly disappearing into the hazy mist, leaving no trace. The atmosphere inside the vehicles was somewhat oppressive. Everyone held on to hope, but reality still loomed before them, a fact they had to acknowledge. Thump. Just then, the vehicle suddenly shook violently, as if it had been lifted up and then slammed down. The driver slammed on the brakes, the tires carving a winding arc across the snow, but it was quickly obscured by the swirling blizzard. What happened? The white-haired old man asked urgently. There wasn't much time left. There was no way he could afford to linger on the road. It looks like we hit a big rock. The driver glanced at the vehicle screen and replied somewhat hesitantly, no, it's not a rock. Everyone get out. Just as everyone was catching their breath, SHI.E.L.D suddenly shouted. He was the first to rush out, standing naked in the swirling snow. Seeing SHI.E.L.D leave the armored vehicle, the others didn't have time to doubt or think. They quickly put on their protective suits and rushed out. In the hazy snow, they could barely see SHI.E.L.D's figure. Their minds were a mess. This sudden order to get out left them completely bewildered. What did we just hit? The white-haired old man shouted again. The driver, trembling, couldn't even utter a word. The white-haired old man was already stronger than him, and his roar, accompanied by anger, terrified him into silence. Thump. Suddenly, the armored vehicle beside him was thrown into the air, crashing heavily onto the snow in the distance. At this moment, everyone finally came to their senses and looked back, completely stunned. A colossal creature, practically a monster, stood upright before them. Its enormous body, its tail somewhat resembling a Boston lobster, was supported only by massive legs. Most terrifying of all was its head. It was impossible to discern what it was. It seemed to be completely encased in enormous armor. What the hell is that? How can such a monstrous thing exist? In an instant, everyone was paralyzed with fear. In their minds, such a thing had never existed. So when the lobster monster appeared, it immediately shattered their long-held worldview. They immediately thought of monsters and aliens from science fiction movies. However, currently, they are more inclined to believe the lobster monster is an alien, or more precisely, a Jupiterian. Because Earth is rapidly moving towards Jupiter, aliens from Jupiter could very well come to Earth. Captain, what do we do? Can we defeat it? This damn world? The clamor only attracted the lobster monster's attention more quickly. They understood that reality was truly cruel. One moment of carelessness could destroy the hope they had painstakingly built. Get out of the way. Get to the side. SHI.E.L.D's voice suddenly rang out, like a powerful stimulant, calming everyone down. Then they quickly ran backward, seemingly with a methodical rhythm. SHI.E.L.D himself charged out at that moment, the wind and snow blowing through his hair, but his eyes were almost unaffected, staring directly at the lobster monster. It appeared? The lobster monster, which shouldn't have been born, was now standing right in front of them. It was certain that it wasn't created by Jupiter's gravity. The most likely explanation was the black-clad man who had helped them regain their lives. His mind processed the situation, but his body couldn't keep up. In a game, this would be described as the work of an elderly player. But now, the lobster monster, which should have had a physical advantage, couldn't keep up with SHI.E.LD's speed at all. With a thud, SHI.E.LD's steel-hard fist slammed into the lobster monster's chest. But SHI.E.L.D had clearly underestimated the lobster monster's defense. Its armor was even harder than diamond, directly blocking SHI.E.LD's punch. Damn, it's got some skills, SHI.E.L.D thought to himself. This was his mistake, or rather, his overconfidence in his strength. After all, having reached level 20, there was no one stronger than him on Blue Star. The suddenly appearing lobster monster, without any data, required only intuitive judgment, making it even less accurate. This misjudgment cost SHI.E.L.D dearly. Although the lobster monster couldn't react at first, it now had ample time to deliver a fatal blow. Pincers as large as an armored vehicle's cargo box slammed down from mid-air at tremendous speed, heading straight for SHI.E.L.D's head. The shadow grew larger, signifying that SHI.E.L.D was about to suffer a fatal attack. SHI.E.L.D remained remarkably calm. The lobster monster's attack appeared powerful and devastating, seemingly unstoppable, and even incredibly fast. However, upon closer analysis, SHI.E.L.D, with his speed, could dodge it in the final 0.5 seconds. Bang! A deafening crash echoed as the lobster monster slammed into the ground, creating a massive crater. Snow and mud flew out in a flurry, as if dancing in the air. The sheer volume of snow, combined with the increasingly fierce blizzard, made it impossible to see anything inside. The lobster monster had poor eyesight and relied almost entirely on it to detect prey and enemies. Even its unique sensory system was significantly hampered by the blizzard, making it impossible to clearly understand the situation inside. In the instant the lobster monster's massive pincers slammed down, Xiao Yi, using his superior speed, brushed past it and vanished into the blizzard. He silently crept forward, constantly searching for the perfect opportunity to deliver a fatal blow to the lobster monster. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 304 Speed. Xiao Yi didn't have much time to waste, so he had to use a surprise attack to end the battle as quickly as possible. Like a ghostly phantom, he moved silently through the fog undetectable to the lobster monster. After circling around from a distance, Gray Lee appeared behind the lobster monster. This time, Xiao Yi had a plan, to kill it with a single blow. The twin weasels stomped the ground, and Xiao Yi shot out like a cannonball, aimed directly at the lobster monster's back. At that moment, the lobster monster reacted. The loud noise and the dismemberment allowed it to pinpoint Xiao Yi's location. Lobster monsters that have evolved to this level have developed some intelligence, although it is still far behind humans. It already has the ability to make judgments. Attacking the back is the strongest point of the lobster monster's entire body. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to describe it as impervious to blades and spears. So, the moment it sensed Xiao Yi behind it, the lobster monster wasn't panicked, but rather quite relieved. Trying to defeat me by attacking from behind? How ridiculous. So naturally, the lobster monster relaxed, preparing to wait for Xiao Yi to reap the consequences of his actions. But in that instant of relaxation, Xiao Yi moved. Yes, he moved. Xiao Yi moved in midair. The terrifying energy stored within his body suddenly erupted, spreading throughout his body via his blood vessels. This explosive energy propelled Xiao Yi into motion in midair, as if a stone slab had appeared in the void. He slammed his right foot down, and in an instant, he hurtled towards the lobster monster's chest at an even greater speed. Everything was within Xiao Yi's calculations. With his level 20 strength, he clearly knew that the lobster monster's hardest point was its back. Those overlapping, layered plates formed the lobster monster's strongest defense. And Xiao Yi was also 80% certain that the lobster monster had developed its own consciousness, its own intelligence. Therefore, when he attacked its carapace, the lobster monster would surely scoff. As long as he seized the moment of relaxation, he could defeat it in a blitzkrieg. Xiao Yi's sudden change of direction in mid-air completely caught the lobster monster off guard. With its limited intelligence, it was utterly bewildered by what had happened. Even worse, it had no chance to defend itself now. Its chest, covered in a patch of white flesh, was now a lamb to the slaughter. In a mere instant, Xiao Yi was upon the lobster monster's chest, its arms enveloped in a milky white energy glow, radiating a suffocating pressure. Roar! Cornered, the lobster monster let out a deafening roar, attempting to block Xiao Yi's attack. But at this point, whatever it did was futile. However, this roar did frighten the foreigners considerably. Their faces turned pale, and countless beads of sweat appeared on their foreheads. Old Bai, do you think Xiao Yi, he won't be eaten by that monster? One of them asked tremulously, but still mustered his courage in a low voice. Everyone else looked at Elder Bai. In their minds, the monster's roar was a declaration of its victory, announcing its imminent feast. No way, those three simple words were spoken with unwavering conviction. As one of humanity's top fighters, Elder Bai's judgment of the situation far surpassed that of the others present. The lobster monster's roar wasn't a declaration of victory, rather. It carried a sense of humiliation and anger, as if it had been mocked. Elder Bai couldn't offer a definitive explanation, only stating that it was the result of years of accumulated combat experience. Really, confusion permeated everyone's state. Meanwhile, the people in the vehicles behind huddled trembling inside. They had clearly seen the lead armored vehicle being hurled away, rolling hundreds of meters across the ground. Panic gripped them, especially after hearing that roar, which instilled extreme fear in them. Could it be that the end of the world is truly inevitable, and they've all died here? The passion and courage they had just displayed slowly faded and vanished with this. Don't panic, the results aren't out yet, we can't give up on ourselves. One of them, his body trembling violently, staggered to his feet, his terrified eyes betraying his current state. Everyone outside was extremely worried. Had the flame of hope they had finally found been extinguished in an instant? With their hands clasped in prayer, they pleaded with the shattered heavens to protect the last spark of fire in their hearts. Xiao, he definitely won't die. This was an unwavering conviction in Elder Bai's heart. After spending so much time with Xiao, Elder Bai had formed a definition of him in his mind. His strength was absolutely top tier, and the potential he could unleash was like a bottomless trench, impossible to fathom. Therefore, no matter how you look at it, this suddenly appearing lobster monster couldn't possibly defeat Xiao, let alone kill him. With such unwavering conviction, Elder Bai possessed a calmness far beyond that of ordinary people. The smoke-filled battle area, coupled with a raging blizzard, made it impossible to discern the situation. But at this moment, amidst a blizzard, a person stood tall, chest rising and falling slightly, breathing in the biting cold air. It was Xiao. Beneath his feet, the lobster monster lay dying, seemingly devoid of any life. The power of the energy burst was still a little lacking. Xiao glanced at his slightly reddened hands, feeling slightly disappointed. He had thought that with the power unleashed at its peak, he could kill the lobster monster in one fell swoop. But he hadn't expected its defense to be so formidable, or rather, it was a misjudgment of his abilities. At level 20, killing a mutated beast instantly was still a bit difficult. However, it was enough, not too much time had been wasted, and it was still within an acceptable range. Experience gained 5,000. Just then, a data panel suddenly appeared in his mind, and the data had increased considerably. 5,000 experience points, not bad. Xiao felt good now, although the lobster monster had delayed him somewhat, the final result seemed quite good. What exactly happened? It hadn't come out yet. Could it be that Xiao was already dead? Bullshit, it's been so long, it must be in the middle of a fierce battle right now. That's right, it has no common sense about combat at all. As time passed, those with a keener understanding of combat quickly grasped the meaning. In other words, the flame of hope in their hearts could be rekindled. However, some remained deeply worried, fearing Xiao might be about to be killed by the mutated beast. Though few, everyone hoped Xiao would win, but the possibility persisted. Look, something's coming out. S.H.I.E.L.D instantly drew everyone's attention. Life or death hinged on this moment. A person. A person. A person. Upon recognizing the outline, everyone shouted excitedly, their faces beaming with undisguised excitement and joy. A person? Needless to say, it was Xiao. Everyone rushed forward, quickly surrounding Xiao. Xiao, who was about to have everyone ready to depart, saw the throng of people running towards him, slightly surprised, and then calmly said, "The monster has been dealt with. Get ready and let's go." The crowd nodded joyfully like chicks, clearly regarding Xiao as their god. Anyone facing such a situation would naturally regard Xiao as a god. Because in the current state of affairs, only Xiao could be relied upon, and only Xiao could become a savior. The world is about to change. Lewis watched Xiao receive the worship of the crowd, his heart surging. If Xiao truly saved Blue Star, he could reach a peak that no one else could ever approach. Here, 99% of the people on Blue Star would worship him as a savior. Becoming the master of Blue Star wouldn't be impossible. But if it really turned out that way, Lewis wouldn't have any complaints. After all, it was Xiao who saved the whole world, saved all of humanity. He deserved to be treated this way. Everyone has family, even if they no longer exist. As long as Blue Star exists, that feeling will always remain. Let's go. After everyone entered the armored vehicles, Xiao gave the order, mobilizing the entire force. The armored vehicle convoy began to move forward again, speeding along the road. At this moment, it seemed that even the heavens understood their urgency, and the raging blizzard gradually subsided. Taking advantage of this momentum, the group drew closer and closer to their destination, the Lois region. It was clear that everyone was extremely excited, a fire burning within them. Saving the world. This was a youthful, almost childish thought that everyone had, but now it was truly happening before their eyes, and they were about to become the protagonists. How could they not be excited? How could they not feel their blood boil? Especially for these elite individuals, it was something they cared about immensely. Because in their hearts, this was something they were destined to do. The armored vehicles sped through the snow, clearing away patches of snow as they raced towards Lois. Beep. 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 Just then, the alarm sounded again, and countless red dots suddenly appeared on the radar screen, surrounding the armored vehicle group in an attack formation. What the hell? The driver was utterly astonished. Because these red dots were moving incredibly fast. It's something that can't possibly exist on Earth. Increase the engines. Spread out. Our vehicles, concentrate fire and attack from the rear. Yi immediately issued the order. Chapter 305 Realm. His judgment of the situation was perhaps even better than Lewis's. Lewis, you go command the other vehicles. At the same time, Yi also made use of Lewis's role. He wasn't in the other vehicles, and he needed to concentrate on dealing with what was behind him, so Lewis became the best choice. Leave it to me. Lewis picked up the walkie-talkie, instantly switching to the mode of the President of the International Coalition Government, and began to command. Under Yi's orders, all the weapons on the armored vehicles were aimed at the approaching red dots, unleashing a storm of attacks. Immediately, most of the red dots were drawn over, and taking advantage of this opportunity, Lewis led the convoy out through the breach. Come on, you little devils. Old Bio also stood up as if unleashing his natural instincts, his face flushed. The red dots behind him were the terrifying beast horde. The others had already escaped Baogoyun. Lewis shouted the situation out loud. Upon receiving this information, Yi breathed a sigh of relief. Surrounded by such a terrifying beast horde, the seemingly incredibly sturdy armored vehicles were actually of little use, and would be smashed to pieces in less than 5 minutes. And those people were almost all technicians, so once trapped in the beast horde, Yi would have no way to free up his hands to rescue them. Therefore, Yi wanted to gather all the beast horde here, not only to rescue the others, but also to deal with the entire beast horde more easily. You guys drive well, Old Bai, come out with me, the two of us will deal with them. Yi turned to look at Old Bai, left a sentence, and directly opened the car door. The howling cold wind rushed in instantly, making everyone's protective suits whistle like a long knife stabbing fiercely. In an instant, Yi rushed out and arrived at the top of the armored vehicle. From here, with a wide field of vision, Yi quickly noticed the ferocious beasts rushing in from all directions. Each one exuded an extremely powerful aura. Although only a very few were stronger than the previous lobster monsters, once their numbers increased, the destructive power they could cause would be beyond imagination. So many. Bai Lao, who had climbed aboard, looked at the surrounding situation, his expression immediately becoming extremely solemn. In all the years that the Wandering Earth project had been going on, the strongest enemies Bai Lao had ever encountered were the resistance forces. This tidal wave of beasts was something he had never encountered before, and the aura they exuded completely overwhelmed the entire space. To catch the thief, catch the leader first. Find their leader and defeat it, Yi said calmly. No matter how many or how terrifying the beast tide was, there would definitely be an extremely powerful beast leading it. As long as they defeated it, even if they couldn't destroy the entire beast tide, they could at least allow Gu Li to escape from it. Too many. Old Bai sensed for a moment and found that most of the ferocious beasts were stronger than him, making it impossible to distinguish them. This was also due to his own weakness. 11 o'clock in the northeast direction, Yi immediately turned around and stared at a ferocious beast whose figure was still unclear in the hazy snowstorm. There was no mistake, it was the one leading the beast tide. That powerful aura that emanated from it was unique. Moreover, its strength far exceeded that of the lobster monster, and it was definitely not an opponent that could be easily dealt with. Everyone, concentrate your firepower at 11 o'clock in the northeast direction and help me open a passage. If we rush over all at once, we will be blocked by the ferocious beasts in front of it, and it will be a complete waste of effort. So what we need is to use the help of others to open a passage for us. In a one-on-one situation, Yi was 80% confident that he could defeat this ferocious beast. Do as he says. Lewis was now acting as the commander, fully demonstrating his power as the president of the International Coalition Government. Those who were originally a little confused and did not know what to do immediately had a clear direction. It was precisely because of Lewis's command. Boom, boom, boom. Countless shells exploded, and a thick haze immediately rose from the northeast, blasting countless ferocious beasts to the side. Soon, a somewhat semblance of a path appeared, leading directly to the king of ferocious beasts in the snowstorm. Old Bai, cover me. Yi unleashed his full power, his aura reaching its peak, and charged forward in an instant. White Hair followed closely, unleashing his strongest power, sparing no effort to ensure Xiaoyi's safe arrival at the king of ferocious beasts. The moment Xiaoyi charged forward, the ferocious beasts of Zhou Kingdom leaped forward without warning, opening their blood-red maws, ready to bite Xiaoyi off. "Don't worry about it, I'll handle it." Old Bai suddenly drew a black iron longsword from his waist, the sword flashing as it sliced off the head of a ferocious beast. But even more ferocious beasts swarmed in, instantly engulfing Old Bai and Xiaoyi. "Go!" Elder Bai unleashed his strongest move, his black iron longsword, shimmering with wisps of white mist, sweeping out in a terrifying arc. The sword energy pierced through every ferocious beast, cleaving them in two. Under the cover of this powerful attack, Xiaoyi successfully charged forward, heading straight for the king beast. He succeeded. Elder Bai, panting heavily, stood leaning against his sword, his face growing increasingly pale, as if he had aged 10 years in an instant. This sword strike had used his primordial essence, requiring a considerable amount of time to recover. But now, there was no time for him to rest. More ferocious beasts charged forward, the bloody aura filing the sky, seeming to devour Elder Bai. "Even if it costs me my life, I will hold you back," Elder Bai grinned, prepared for death. With so many ferocious beasts, holding them back even for a short while was worthwhile. Killing one was a loss, killing two would be a bonus. With a death-defying resolve, Elder Bai once again used his primordial essence, this time with even greater balance. Because right now, his task was to stall the ferocious beasts, not kill them. Unimpeded, Xiaoyi quickly arrived before the king beast, face to face. A gorilla, Xiaoyi couldn't help but ask when he saw the beast before him. "I'm called the Blizzard Ape." A sudden roar startled Xiaoyi. This king beast could actually talk? Completely beyond Xiaoyi's imagination, just how powerful was it? But quickly, Xiaoyi calmed down. Talking was even better. He wanted to know where these monsters came from. "Gorillas, where did you come from?" "I'm called the Blizzard Ape, you useless human." The Blizzard Ape was extremely agitated and angry. It hated people the most. It was far superior to those dirty gorillas from that filthy planet. It didn't know where they'd gone. "Alright, Blizzard Ape, where did you come from?" To get useful information, Xiaoyi could only go along with the Blizzard Ape's words. "Where did you come from?" "You wouldn't know," the Blizzard Ape said mockingly. But this one sentence completely confused Xiaoyi. How could I know? How could I know? These guys shouldn't even be on Blue Star. Could it be? A fragment of memory flashed through Xiaoyi's mind, seemingly revealing the answer before his eyes. "Haha, it seems you know. Very well, then you can die without regrets," the Blizzard Ape roared to the sky. The Blizzard Ape's words made Xiaoyi understand something instantly, though only a little, but a door was already in front of him, just waiting to be stepped through. "You will die here today, so if you have any last words, you can say them." Xiaoyi's face was calm as he looked at the Blizzard Ape as if he were looking at a corpse. "Ow! Ow! Ow! Ow!" The Blizzard Ape pounded its chest violently, showing Xiaoyi its strength and anger. No one had ever dared to be so arrogant before the battle even began. Does he think he's some kind of evil emperor? That he can kill me with a single finger? The Blizzard Ape's anger was palpable, its snow-white fur stood on end, sharp as steel spikes, fully prepared for battle. Moreover, its eyes seemed to burn with raging fire, making it appear extremely ferocious. Xiaoyi beckoned to the Blizzard Ape, probing it and stirring up its anger. Once enraged, that would be the moment the Blizzard Ape revealed its weakness. This kind of low-level tactic was extremely common among humans, but for the Blizzard Ape, it was probably a first, making it easier to fall into the trap. In the blink of an eye, the Blizzard Ape charged out like a cannonball, carrying an unstoppable impact, as if to smash it into pulp. Especially its arms, now stained black, looked like two giant iron hammers, possessing terrifying power capable of cleaving through anything in the world. The blizzard along the way seemed to have been forcibly carved out of a vast road by the Blizzard Ape, and at the end of this road stood Xiaoyi. At this moment, Xiaoyi's expression was slightly solemn. The Blizzard Ape was not the lobster monster from before, its strength was many levels higher, and he had to be cautious. All the immense energy within his body was mobilized, swirling around Xiaoyi's entire body, especially his fists, where it condensed into dazzling light. If Elder Bai were here, seeing this scene, he would be speechless with shock. To condense energy to such a level required raising one's physical level to a terrifying degree, essentially breaking through a realm. And this realm was the pinnacle of Blue Star, the limitation Blue Star imposed upon him. Elder Bai had once heard Yu Chengdong mention that he could vaguely sense the limitations imposed by Blue Star, preventing him from further improvement. Perhaps Yu Chengdong's strength was the highest combat power Blue Star could withstand. Once Yu Chengdong broke through, he would likely dominate Blue Star, reaching an incomparably terrifying realm. To maintain the balance of Blue Star, Yu Chengdong's improvement was suppressed without limit. But now, both Xiao Yi and the Blizzard Ape have already broken through the limitations of Blue Star and reached that ever-high realm. Chapter 306 Energy. This might be due to Jupiter's gravity, which was the only explanation Elder Bai could offer. But Xiao Yi understood that things weren't like that. He seemed to have another, unknown side. Boom. A deafening roar echoed as Xiao Yi's fists and the Blizzard Ape's fists collided like a collision between Mars and Earth. The energy from both sides first condensed at the center of the impact, then spread outwards at an incredible speed, instantly sweeping across an area of several thousand meters. Countless ferocious beasts, as well as Elder Bai himself, were impacted by this energy storm and were directly thrown away. Even the armored vehicle trapped in the center of the encirclement was not unexpected, rolling several times on the ground before coming to a stop. This battle seemed to have turned into a personal show between Xiao Yi and the Blizzard Ape. Those who were not strong enough could only lie on the ground, resisting the spreading energy, and waiting for the battle to end. The outcome of a battle often determined the victory or defeat of a super powerful opponent. Xiao Yi, you absolutely have to. Elder Bai clenched his fists. The Blizzard Ape was no easy opponent, so he no longer had the absolute confidence and certainty he once possessed. Whether Xiao Yi could win truly depended on himself. Inside the overturned armored vehicle, Lewis, along with the other wounded, crawled out. Protected by their protective suits, none of them were seriously injured. Therefore, they too were watching and waiting for the final victor to emerge. President Lewis, one of them approached, also gazing into the distance. I don't know, but pray. Abandon your scientific beliefs and pray to God. Lewis didn't say much, only speaking earnestly. He couldn't judge the specifics, it was up to Xiao Yi himself. If he couldn't defeat a Blizzard Ape, the last flame of hope would be extinguished. At this moment, the other scientists also abandoned their scientific beliefs, turning to a god they didn't believe in. At the very center of the battlefield, Xiao Yi and the Blizzard Ape were still clashing, both unleashing terrifying energy, attempting to overpower each other through sheer brute force. But clearly, such reckless moves had no effect. Thump, 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 thump. Both felt something was wrong and suddenly changed their moves. After exchanging hundreds of blows, they finally retreated, ending this probing exchange. After this exchange, both the Blizzard Ape and Xiao Yi understood each other's strength. They were evenly matched, neither able to gain an advantage. The two stared intently at each other, seemingly trying to see through each other's moves, find their weaknesses, and then take them down in one fell swoop. Whoosh! The Blizzard Ape pushed off the ground with both legs, instantly flying high into the air, then crashing down like a meteorite, casting a shadow over Xiao Yi. A crow taking a plane, Xiao Yi scoffed, watching the Blizzard Ape's moves. It actually had that kind of feel to it. Then I'll kick the bastard. Xiao Yi simultaneously unleashed his power, shifting his body to the side, his feet aimed at the now hardened Blizzard Ape. But in mid-air, the Blizzard Ape suddenly changed its posture, as if using a stepping stone, leaping directly into the air to a higher position. From this superior vantage point, its feet, larger than an elephant's foot, aimed directly at Xiao Yi's back. If that kick landed, Xiao Yi would be crippled, if not killed, and might spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. This teleportation-like ability surprised Xiao Yi. He could only do this when he possessed the Space Stone and was much stronger. But now, the Blizzard Ape, whose strength was roughly equal to his own, could actually teleport. It was truly unbelievable. But do you think my strength is only this much? Xiao Yi's lips curled into a sneer, as if mocking the Blizzard Ape's naivete. The sudden change didn't frighten Xiao Yi, because he was already prepared. Xiao Yi guessed that the Blizzard Ape's strength was far superior to the lobster monster's, so whether it possessed any special abilities was also within his consideration. You know what? Your move, though strong and sudden, isn't enough for me. Xiao Yi grinned, exuding confidence. I'm going to show you that I already possessed this ability in my previous life, and it far surpasses yours. Trying to use something I've already mastered against me is a bit presumptuous. The Blizzard Ape's attack was swift. In the brief moment Xiaoyi hesitated, its entire body crashed down like a mountain. A massive shadow instantly enveloped Xiaoyi. But even under this terrifying impact, Xiaoyi remained remarkably calm. The energy within his body had already surged through his limbs the instant the Blizzard Ape activated its teleportation ability. Beneath his tough skin, every inch of Xiaoyi's flesh shone with dazzling light, his aura reaching its absolute peak. With a casual sidestep, he vanished from his spot as if entering a spatial tunnel. The Blizzard Ape's deadly strike, delivered with absolute confidence, slammed into the ground, compressing the air with its force. A crater several meters deep was dug into the ground, sending up clouds of dust and dirt, and a terrifying shockwave swept across an area of tens of meters. But Xiaoyi, the target of its attack, stood far to the side, watching the Blizzard Ape like a wolf. This condescending posture greatly displeased the Blizzard Ape, which immediately pounced from the thick dust, its claws gleaming with a chilling light, aiming for Xiaoyi's chest, intending to pierce his heart. Was it enraged? Xiaoyi's eyes suddenly changed, his entire demeanor transforming from a quiet, handsome man into a ruthless killer. Xiaoyi didn't choose a direct confrontation, he stood still, waiting for the perfect opportunity. Just as the Blizzard Ape's claws were only 5 meters away from Xiaoyi, Xiaoyi moved. Like a cannonball fired, he vanished from his spot in an instant. Reaching the Blizzard Ape in a flash, he used his waist and abdomen to arch his upper body backward, forming an L shape, and slid down to the ape's abdomen. Pale fur covered his belly, but for any wild beast, the belly is not particularly strong in defense compared to other parts of its body. When the Blizzard Ape realized Xiaoyi's movements, it panicked instantly. It knew where its weakness lay, so during the battle, it had forced Xiaoyi to fight in its most advantageous positions. However, now it was too late. Xiaoyi slid through its belly in just 2 seconds. It was too fast. With a Blizzard Ape's reaction speed, Xiaoyi had already passed right through it the instant he struck. No, the Blizzard Ape roared, its crimson eyes revealing a mad glint. Let's see who's stronger. Xiaoyi, beneath the Blizzard Ape's abdomen, condensed his hands into palm blades. Shimmering with a milky white light, like a laser blade capable of cutting through iron like mud, about to pierce the Blizzard Ape's abdomen. But in that instant, Xiaoyi sensed something amiss, his hair standing on end, as if something extremely terrible was about to happen. Damn it! It actually wants to fight to the death. Upon realizing the Blizzard Ape's actions, Xiaoyi, unusually furious, cursed out. The Blizzard Ape immediately abandoned its support, its mountain-like body slamming down, a typical case of trading life for life. If Xiaoyi were to cut open the Blizzard Ape's abdomen, the final result would be his bones shattering under its 1,000-pound weight. Even if he could withstand the Blizzard Ape's massive body, his chance of killing it would be essentially destroyed, at most only able to inflict serious injury. And was it really worth trading his own heavy body for a serious injury to the Blizzard Ape? For the first time, such a consideration arose in Xiaoyi's mind, but he only had a mere 3 seconds. Making a decision in those 3 seconds was undoubtedly a tremendous test. Thump, the Blizzard Ape's massive body slammed heavily to the ground, causing the earth to tremble 3 times. This demonstrated just how heavy its body was. Kid, you still don't have the guts. The Blizzard Ape quickly stood up, looking at the blurry figure in the snowstorm, and mocked mercilessly. An ordinary human still doesn't have this kind of courage. This is the domineering spirit of our King Beast clan. The Blizzard Ape pounded its chest, letting out a triumphant roar that seemed to shake the entire sky. The other fallen beasts, upon hearing this unparalleled roar, became excited as if injected with adrenaline, echoing with joyful roars. The once tranquil battlefield became incredibly chaotic due to the roars of numerous beasts. What a bunch of beasts! Don't they know public places are off limits for noise? Xiaoyi frowned, clearly annoyed. He hated nothing more than people yelling and shouting. It showed a complete lack of manners, and what he hated even more was the constant noise in his ears. So, all of you, shut up forever, Xiaoyi said calmly, but his words were filled with an overwhelming chilling aura. A terrifying burst of energy erupted from Xiaoyi's body, like a sword about to be drawn, its power sweeping across all directions, transcending past and present lives. Even the arrogant snow ape was shocked upon sensing Xiaoyi's sword energy. This, it seemed to be the sword energy of the person he had encountered before. A wave of fear rose from the depths of his heart. That terrifying figure seemed to reappear before him, constantly overlapping with Xiaoyi's form. No, it couldn't be him. He didn't have the qualifications. How could he be here? The Blizzard Ape tried its best to deny it, but the deep-seated fear lingered in its mind, making it restless and agitated. Xiao, gathering all his strength, had his senses become extremely sharp, and immediately noticed a Blizzard Ape's abnormality. He shot out like a flash of light, an invisible energy enveloping his body, forming an incomparably sharp sword that pierced straight into the Blizzard Ape's heart. Chapter 307 Rules. Even if it's him, I'm not the same person I used to be. The Blizzard Ape suddenly roared, its pale fur standing on end, turning from white to black, its entire body seemingly covered in armor, its hardness increasing dramatically. The sudden change in the Blizzard Ape's body surprised Xiao slightly. He had never felt that aura before. It was as if the heavens had lent the Blizzard Ape a sliver of power, causing its strength to surge. But only the Blizzard Ape knew the terrifying consequences of using this power. Because this power didn't belong to it, nor was it something it could control. It was only because a peerless genius had emerged from the beast race that they wouldn't fall too far behind those favored by heaven. Thinking of those who could freely manipulate this energy, the Blizzard Ape felt an uncontrollable rage. It seemed that from birth, heaven had divided them into different classes, and the beast race was at the bottom. This predetermined status from the start was a source of resentment and bitterness for every weak race. Let me kill you first, to help my kind gain even greater power, the Blizzard Ape roared, transforming into a ball of iron as it slammed into Xiao. A fierce wind and dust swept through the air, a tornado-like force that swept away all obstacles in its path. Then let me test your new ability. A hint of desire flickered in Xiao's eyes, a yearning for power and a determination to prove himself. If he could achieve this, wouldn't it mean he had a chance to break the current stalemate? In short, before everything was settled, he would do his utmost to reverse the situation. Energy swirled around his hands, a hazy mist enhancing the aura, as if bolts of lightning were coiling around him, creating an incredibly powerful impact. Xiao's strength suddenly surged to its peak, stronger than ever before. Both seemed to have their battle power fully unleashed, determined to determine a victor in this fight. Yi had no time to waste here with the Blizzard Ape, and the Blizzard Ape would also enter a brief period of weakness after using this power. Therefore, for both, there was only one chance: the winner lives, the loser dies. The laws of nature are that simple, brutal, and cruel. Both sides had to accept this, because under the suppression of this power, their speed was extremely fast. Perhaps in less than a second, the two were already clashing. Each strike was at its maximum speed, only a few after-images could be seen, making it impossible to discern their techniques. From the side, they looked like two lightning-fast black shadows, constantly intertwining and then suddenly separating. Sometimes, the shocking power could be felt, but only a trace was projected. Most of it was neutralized by the collisions. Therefore, this battle was extremely confusing and frustrating for ordinary Blue Star soldiers. They couldn't see which side had the upper hand, and therefore had no idea whether Xiao had withstood it. They weren't even spectators, because their shouts and actions had no effect on the battle between Xiao and the Blizzard Ape at the center of the battlefield. The speed increased rapidly, and the two dark figures were soon obscured. Only the fierce clanging of metal against metal and the ever-growing shockwaves could be heard. It was clear that the battle between Xiao and the Blizzard Ape was nearing its end, and the final outcome would soon be decided. At this moment, the Blue Star warriors' hearts were taut with tension, their clenched hands almost twisting together, and beads of sweat constantly dripping from their foreheads. However, Xiao and the Blizzard Ape, in the midst of the battle, had completely different states of mind. At the beginning of their exchange, the Blizzard Ape could use its superior strength to steadily overpower Xiao, relentlessly attacking him. But as time passed, the Blizzard Ape sensed something amiss. It was as if Xiao had also mastered his own power, capable of wielding strength no less than his own. Only Xiao was filled with ecstatic joy. The abilities brought by his rebirth were exciting him for the first time. It could absorb the opponent's energy, analyze it, and ultimately form a power law within its own body identical to that of the poison-defeating powder. Yes, a law of power. When the energy within its body passed through this law, it possessed an unparalleled power, seemingly bestowed directly by the heavens, capable of shattering everything on Earth. Most importantly, this power law formed within its body seemed to have no harmful effects, acting like a blood vessel, accelerating blood circulation. Such miraculous effects astonished even Xiao. As Xiao became more and more accustomed to this power law, The power he unleashed grew increasingly terrifying. Ultimately, the Blizzard Ape was unable to withstand the power Xiaoyi unleashed. How is this possible? He doesn't belong to that world, how could he possess its abilities? The Blizzard Ape was filled with shock. Originally, using this energy required an unimaginable price, but now Xiaoyi could freely manipulate it. With this shift in power, the Blizzard Ape was naturally becoming increasingly outmatched. Tell me, what exactly did you do? As Xiaoyi threw another punch, the Blizzard Ape, Liang Kang, blocked it, his eyes bloodshot, and asked incredulously. So you want to know? Then let me teach you. Little Xiaoyi grinned, looking like a demon from hell, mercilessly mocking the Blizzard Ape. The power laws within his body surged once more, enveloping Xiaoyi's fist. In an instant, the aura emanating from Xiaoyi's fist resembled a live volcano, possessing a heavy sense of power and a suffocating explosive force. The Blizzard Ape felt a chill of fear. In its own judgment, it was very likely that it would be unable to withstand Xiaoyi's attack this time. Ha ha ha, it seems I'm just like my ancestors, or rather, is our race simply unable to escape this innate curse? The Blizzard Ape roared defiantly, convinced of its impending defeat. Then let me go crazy one last time. Its voice was filled with endless sorrow, as if an era was about to end. A dazzling, blazing light emanated from its body, like a star from the boundless universe about to unleash its final brilliance. Damn it, Xiaoyi immediately sensed the Blizzard Ape's intention and couldn't help but curse. No wonder people these days are so prone to suicide, even beasts do it. The Blizzard Ape's sudden action almost caught Xiaoyi off guard. When he sensed the danger, Xiaoyi had no time to dodge. With my blood, I will pave the way for my race. The Blizzard Ape's eyes were bloodshot, its booming voice carrying an extreme madness. Since from birth, its entire life and worldview had been laid out. Then let my life shake this damned rule even slightly. Even if it's just a small pebble thrown into the ocean. It can still create ripples, and that's enough. Boom. A thunderclap seemed to cleave the heavens and earth, as if the world had been reborn, the winds and clouds shifting dramatically, and the already terrifying blizzard raged even more fiercely. It seemed that anyone could be instantly annihilated. The energy wave generated by the blizzard's self-destruction rapidly spread outwards, sweeping away everything in its path, with no one able to hinder it. Damn it! Xiaoyi mobilized all the energy in his body, but suddenly noticed that there were ordinary people who had followed him behind. Their bodies were simply no match for such powerful force. Even the slightest pull would tear them apart instantly. He had brought them, and Xiaoyi was responsible for their fate, so things suddenly became incredibly complicated. Originally, Xiaoyi only needed to block part of the energy wave, but he was now forced to block almost all of it. It's up to you. Don't let me down now. Xiaoyi frantically mobilized the energy within his body. At this moment, the energy in every limb, bone, and blood was transported out, roaring wildly like a dragon emerging from the sea. Xiaoyi's brows furrowed. He had no time to think, and could only rely on his immense strength to forcefully block the snow ape's attack. Boom. A tidal wave of energy shock waves crashed against Xiaoyi's energy shield like a storm, instantly creating endless tremors. Under the constant impact and consumption, even Xiaoyi was starting to feel the strain. His body was sending out constant danger signals. If Xiaoyi continued to mobilize energy like this, he was most likely to be defeated due to excessive energy consumption. Hold on for me, Xiaoyi roared angrily, his eyes bloodshot, his entire being exuding an extreme level of strength. Every drop of sweat on his forehead instantly melted into water vapor, drifting into the air. Under such intense energy collision, Xiaoyi's body shrank at a visible speed, as if all the flesh and blood inside had disappeared, leaving only skin and bones. Just a damn loser, and he managed to put me in this embarrassing situation. Fuck, Xiaoyi couldn't help but roar, venting his inner dissatisfaction. After absorbing the power law of the Blizzard Ape, Xiaoyi was full of confidence, absolutely certain that he could defeat the Blizzard Ape. But now, what had caused Xiaoyi to fall into such a predicament was still his own weakness. If he had the strength of level 30, even if the Blizzard Ape self-destructed, what did it matter if there were so many people behind it that couldn't resist? He could block them all with his own strength, without the difficulties he was facing now. Ah! Xiaoyi roared to the sky again. The power in his body had been almost completely drained. And the energy wave generated by the Blizzard Ape's self-destruction was also about to end. As long as he resisted for a little longer, he would succeed. Chapter 308 Engine. Xiaoyi gritted his teeth, his vision blurring, but his consciousness remained, his arms still in a defensive stance. Boom. The final surge of power, the terrifying suppressive force, and the awe-inspiring emotion finally ceased as the blizzard stopped. Huff. 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 Xiaoyu gasped heavily, her legs bent, looking incredibly weak. The ground 20 meters below Zhouguo sank 5 meters, creating a huge crater. To the uninitiated, it would have looked like a falling meteorite. Is it over? Whispers came from behind, mostly discussions about the battle. Did Xiaoyu survive? He definitely survived. He was the strongest being on Blue Star. The voices grew louder as they approached, and Xiaoyu understood that all his efforts had been rewarded. Xiaoyu, are you alright? Just then, an urgent voice rang out, and the tattered old man appeared before Xiaoyu. He also looked extremely weak, but compared to Xiaoyu, he still had considerable energy, which showed just how terrifying the injuries Xiaoyu had endured were. I'm fine, Xiaoyu replied briefly. Even so, Old Man Bai was even more worried. From his senses alone, he knew that Xiaoyu had suffered unspeakable trauma. Rest for a while, Old Man Bai said softly to Xiaoyu. Hearing this, Xiaoyu immediately shook his head. There wasn't enough time left, and he hadn't yet fallen to that state. There was still enough time to reach Lois. If he rested here now and let Blue Star be torn apart by Jupiter's gravity, there would truly be no chance of recovery. Xiaoyu would absolutely not allow his life to be lost again. This was his second rebirth, and he had to seize it with all his might. But your body might not be able to hold on, Old Man Bai said with great concern. In his view, as long as Xiaoyu was still alive for even a minute, the problem of Jupiter's gravity could definitely be resolved. But if Xiaoyu were to fall, there would be no way to save him. Blue Star might truly be destroyed. I know my own body. Notify the rear, we're heading to Lois immediately. There's no time to waste. Make up for lost time on the way, Xiaoyu ordered Elder Bai. Then, with his battered body, he entered the armored vehicle. Elder Bai immediately relayed Xiaoyu's order to the rear. They, who had initially wanted to check on Xiaoyu, could only quickly board the armored vehicle and head to Lois as fast as possible. Sigh, Elder Bai sighed, glancing at Xiaoyu, who was already in the vehicle, his expression becoming increasingly complex. Although he didn't know why Xiaoyu was doing this, his change from indifference towards Blue Star to such concern deeply moved Elder Bai. He couldn't explain the reason, but as long as it was good for Blue Star, Elder Bai would continue to follow. Now, let's have one last dance. President Lewis's eyes were full of hope. Now, only the Lois region remained. Once there, with Xiaoyu present, dealing with Jupiter's gravity would be a breeze. Everything was developing in a positive direction, heading towards a brighter future. Without the beast horde's obstruction, Xiaoyu and his group moved extremely quickly, soon arriving at the Lois region. This small place, located in the plains of the Asian plate, was a crucial link in their attempt to block Jupiter's gravity. The armored vehicle stopped, and everyone donned the protective suits and grabbed their necessary equipment before disembarking. Xiaoyu's body had been well rested during the half hour in the vehicle and was almost fully recovered. Of course, such rapid recovery was not only due to his own strength but also largely due to the power of law he had obtained from the Blizzard Ape. The power law not only granted Xiaoyu terrifying strength but also accelerated his recovery. It could be said that the power of law was a treasure bestowed by God. Even ordinary people who mastered it would experience incredible improvements. How much more so for a powerhouse like Xiaoyu, who had reached level 20, the extent of his improvement was indescribable. Is everyone ready? Everyone lined up, their previous relaxation gone, their expressions serious, their eyes fixed straight ahead. At this moment, everyone understood that success or failure hinged on this moment, and there was no room for failure. Ready, everyone shouted in unison. Now, all you need to do is put all the flints you brought into the small planetary engines. Next, control the direction of the planetary engines, aim them at Jupiter, and then detonate Jupiter. Xiaoyu explained his plan in detail. Upon hearing this, the others immediately thought of what Xiaoyu had said earlier, using his body to cover the final distance. What would you do? One of them questioned. All eyes were now on Xiaoyu. They were eager to know how he would use his body to cover the final 20 million kilometers. Well, you could say that's my secret, so I know exactly what to do. You just need to do your part. Xiaoyu shook his head, not intending to reveal his secret. Because he hadn't demonstrated this ability to others, there was no need to explain. The most crucial thing now is to ignite Jupiter and directly eliminate the influence of Jupiter's gravity. No need to ask more questions. Heroes always have their own difficulties. We just need to do our part and help Earth overcome this challenge. Even Lewis stepped forward. As the president of the International Coalition Government, having long commanded this group, his words carried considerable authority. Since even Lewis had spoken, they could only suppress their curiosity and focus on dealing with the current predicament. The journey had taken about 2 hours, leaving them with less than an hour. Not a single second could be wasted in this hour. Blue Star had to be saved, otherwise everything they had done today would be in vain. Teams 1 and 2, go to the southwest corner. The control room is inside. You are responsible for operating it well. The rest of the teams, go directly to the planetary engine, put all the flints in, and ensure it operates at full capacity. Lewis and Elderby played extremely important roles. With their command, everything became orderly. Looking at the busy crowd before him, Xiaoyi felt a slight sense of comfort, then looked up at the almost imperceptible, pitch-black sky above. Less than 50 million kilometers away lay Jupiter, which he was about to face. The gravity from Jupiter had already begun to tear apart any piece of land or ocean on Blue Star. If it continued to approach, the final outcome would be the complete shattering of Blue Star. Meanwhile, in space, inside the International Space Station, after Liu Peqiang was forcibly injected with medication by Moss, the entire space station, in a self-preservation manner, broke away from the orbit guiding Earth and circled to its left. If anyone on the space station were awake now, they could clearly see Earth constantly approaching Jupiter, countless fragments pouring into Jupiter's interior. Before long, the entire Earth would be torn apart by Jupiter. The continuation of humanity depends on you people, Moss muttered to itself, looking at the sleeping people in the hibernation pods. In its calculations, Earth had no chance of escaping Jupiter. The only way was for the people on the space station to continue human civilization. Perhaps they would become the first humans of a new era, but this was their mission, to continue the wandering Earth plan in the void of the universe until a new home was found. No, Liu Peqiang, inside the hibernation pod, suddenly convulsed violently, as if a real scene was unfolding before his eyes. Thump, Liu Peqiang banged on the glass window, but showed no signs of waking up. Moss, seemingly oblivious to Liu Peqiang's unusual behavior, continued its patrol of the space station. It needed to protect the station from the shockwave from the Jupiter-Jupiter collision. On Blue Star, in the lowest region, everyone was ready to activate the planetary engines. Xiaoyu was already standing atop the planetary engines, ready to jump on the moment they started. The energy from the power of the laws was enough to propel the shockwave upwards by another 20 million kilometers. This meant the shockwave from the planetary engines could reach the hydrogen layer on Jupiter's surface, detonating it and causing Jupiter to explode, thus saving Blue Star from this crisis. But honestly, Xiaoyi wasn't sure if his body could withstand the terrifying shockwave. A shockwave reaching 50 million kilometers, the energy it unleashed was unimaginable. However, Xiaoyi was prepared for injury. This mission was already incredibly difficult. From the beginning, Xiaoyi hadn't expected to return unscathed. A little mishap is inevitable for a man. Prepare to activate the planetary engine, aim at Jupiter's location, and report all data in 10 seconds. Lewis, as the commander, meticulously carried out the task. But at that moment, Xiaoyi suddenly sensed an extremely dangerous aura surging towards him. 10, 9, 8. Wait. As Lewis counted down, Xiaoyi immediately and cautiously shouted pause. If they didn't stop, Xiaoyi had a gut feeling they would all die here. When Xiaoyi shouted that, everyone stopped what they were doing and turned to look upwards. Atop the planetary engine, standing in the wind and snow, Xiaoyi resembled a venerable being about to break through the heavens and earth, radiating an awe-inspiring aura. Who is it this time? Feeling the increasingly intense danger around him, Xiaoyi frowned deeply. Chapter 309 Imitation. After defeating the blizzard ape and the beast lake it brought, Xiaoyi thought he had entered a period of calm. But now it seemed that everything was merely the prelude to a storm. Since it had arrived, and judging from its aura, it was definitely not simple. The matter of saving Blue Star had to be postponed. Otherwise, there would be no chance to unleash the energy shockwave from the planetary engine. Soon, dangerous signals kept entering Xiaoyi's brain, constantly telling him that he had to be extremely cautious. In the snowstorm, a black shadow suddenly flashed by, leaving no trace. making its movement almost impossible to detect. Quite strong. Xiaoyu had already reached a conclusion in his mind. The formidable opponent was even more terrifying than the Blizzard Ape. Apart from Xiaoyu, no one else had detected any trace of it. The black shadow seemed not to have appeared before them at all. But the incredibly dangerous aura still made everyone's hearts tighten, their fists clenched, and their eyes fixed on Xiaoyu. Their backbone was Xiaoyu. Without him, the entire rescue plan would be a complete mess and a total failure. Xiaoyu was fully prepared for battle, his mind highly focused, radiating outwards towards the Fam Kingdom, which was 10 meters away from Zhou Kingdom. This 10-meter radius was the limit of Xiaoyu's mental power. Beyond that, he could only perceive things slightly. This 10-meter radius of Fan Kingdom was like a spider web. Anything entering it would be immediately detected by Xiaoyu. The hunting plan had officially begun. Xiaoyu used his mental power to continuously scan his surroundings, ready to deliver a devastating blow to the black shadow as soon as it reappeared. In the blink of an eye, the black shadow flashed again, quickly entering the Fam Kingdom covered by Xiaoyu, and Xiaoyu quickly detected its movement. But the instant Xiaoyu caught sight of it, it flashed from one place to another, its speed so fast that it was almost impossible to pinpoint its location. Damn. It's pretty fast. Xiaoyu was extremely tense at this moment, daring not to relax for a moment. The enemy he faced this time was far stronger than himself, so he had to deal with it using his strongest attack. Come on, Xiaoyu shifted his feet slightly, changing direction again to look at another location. That was the spot where it had just flashed past. Its extremely high speed made it difficult for Xiaoyu to pinpoint its location. He could only vaguely sense where it would appear next. Boom. As Xiaoyu locked onto the target, the black shadow suddenly changed direction, originally heading northeast, but suddenly attacking Xiaoyu. Its speed was almost impossible to react to. Fortunately, Xiaoyu had been on high alert, so he managed to dodge the fatal blow with his lightning-fast reflexes. Moreover, as the black shadow passed over his head, milky white light emanated from his hands, power instantly flowing into them, and he slammed them down towards the shadow's lower body. A piercing scream suddenly erupted in the silent air, like the sound of a throat being torn apart. But with that sound, the black shadow that was about to be struck by Xiaoyu vanished into thin air. Another special ability? Xiaoyu's mind raced, and he immediately understood. But yet another special ability still surprised him. The combat power of this world had perhaps completely collapsed due to the opening of the Chagan Lake region. With Blue Star's current top-tier combat power, they were nothing but a joke in the face of these suddenly appearing ferocious beasts. Did he have to continue protecting Blue Star's people after protecting Blue Star? Xiaoyu felt a headache coming on. The thought was unfair. He had only opened a passage. Was it necessary to treat him like this? Level 20 was, at best, a low to high level in the world of these ferocious beasts. Wasn't this just playing with him? But at this point, Xiaoyu had to accept this fact, even if his abilities weren't sufficient for such a daunting task. The suddenly vanished black shadow rushed out again from the opposite direction, filled with chilling killing intent, aimed directly at Xiaoyu. If he hadn't dodged this time, his heart would probably have been pierced through. Fortunately, after numerous battles, Xiaoyu's senses had become extremely sharp, allowing him to instantly detect the approaching black shadow. He whirled around, his fists glowing with white light, unleashing all the energy within him, transforming it into a spear that pierced the shadow. Its speed was so great it seemed to pierce through space itself, reaching the shadow at a speed imperceptible to the naked eye. Perhaps the shadow didn't even have time to react, nor did it attempt to dodge, instead meeting the spear's attack head-on. This scene was like a needle against a wheat on. Both unleashed extreme power, the powerful shockwaves instantly overshadowing the planetary engine's firepower. This clash of titans intensified the anxiety of those below. They blamed themselves for not being able to help Xiaoyu in the sky. If they could contribute some of their strength, wouldn't Xiaoyu's battle above be much easier? No one could provide a definitive answer, but in their hearts, it was unquestionable. They believed that many hands make light work, and unity is strength. Just like their earlier division of labor, they quickly started the planetary engine. However, whether this could be used against Xiaoyu was a huge question. Xiaoyu's combat prowess had already surpassed the level of Blue Star, and their help might truly be useless. It might even have the opposite effect. Die? In the instant the shadow clashed with a spear, Xiaoyu suddenly charged out, his entire body bursting with dazzling light, like a meteorite falling from the sky, containing immense energy. Boom! A thunderous roar instantly silenced the world. Everyone below covered their ears, the deafening sound almost made their heads explode. After using all his power, Xiaoyi instantly killed the shadow with a single move, giving it no chance to survive. Xiaoyi didn't even consider capturing the shadow alive. After all, even if he captured it, he might not get any information out of it, which would only put him in a more passive position. Therefore, the best method was to kill the shadow directly. Explosions echoed through the air, like fireworks bursting intermittently. When the explosions subsided, the thick dust from Zhou Kingdom dissipated, leaving behind Xiaoyi standing atop the planetary engine, like a supreme being surveying the world. Below, Elder Bai couldn't help but lick his lips. Such power and domineering presence completely overwhelmed them all. Even the usually composed President Louis was parched, his forehead covered in sweat. If Xiaoyi were to say he wanted to be president now, probably no one would disagree. He had won everyone's hearts. Just as everyone was filled with emotion, Xiaoyi interrupted the atmosphere, urging them to activate the planetary engine immediately. Time was running out. While dealing with the shadow hadn't taken too long, Jupiter was drawing ever closer to Earth. With Jupiter's continued gravitational pull, Earth's landmarks were about to crumble from their layers. And the planetary engine would be the first to be affected. Soon, the Earth's crust would undergo a drastic change, instantly destroying the planetary engine. Without the planetary engine, Xiaoyi's abilities were insufficient to detonate Jupiter, otherwise, they would all be going to meet the king of the underworld. Quick, quick, quick! Everyone, stay alert, Louis shouted with all his might. Everyone snapped back to reality, quickly returning to their posts and operating the planetary engine. In a few short seconds, the planetary engine unleashed terrifying energy again, aiming at the surface of Jupiter, but it was still 20 million kilometers away. Xiaoyi no longer hesitated, perhaps some more monsters would appear. Come on, Xiaoyi shouted inwardly, then suddenly gathered all his power. In an instant, his entire body became crystal clear, like an aurora. At this moment, Xiaoyi was trembling, seemingly about to collapse. Killing the shadow had consumed too much energy, leading to this predicament. Therefore, Xiaoyi had to use his life force energy, which was stored within him and could only be used in life or death situations. But now, it was a life or death situation. If Jupiter wasn't detonated, Blue Star would be destroyed, and everyone would be finished. Having been fortunate enough to be reborn a second time, though it's still uncertain whether it's truly fortunate, Xiaoyi would never let it slip through his fingers again. He had to seize this hard-won opportunity and forge his own path to becoming the strongest. Perhaps he would even have a chance to travel through time and enter the Marvel Universe, where he could encounter those familiar faces again. With this thought, Xiaoyi, his entire body radiating golden light, leaped directly into the energy beam of the planetary engine. Instantly, the energy beam surged like it had been injected with adrenaline, reaching unprecedented heights, like a powerful being using unparalleled means to tear Jupiter to shreds. Oh my god! Am I hallucinating? Is he courting death? Sacrificing himself for our sake? Everyone on the screen saw Xiaoyi leap into the energy beam without hesitation. At that moment, they were utterly shocked, speechless, their lips trembling. Everyone firmly believed that Xiaoyi had died in the energy beam. He had exchanged his life for the existence of Blue Star. Everyone saluted Xiaoyi. Elder Bai took the lead, his expression solemn, his eyes filled with absolute respect, saluting the energy beam. Others followed suit, but not everyone had such strong mental fortitude. A large number shed tears of sorrow. A powerful figure, someone who could lead Blue Star to a better future, had died for them. Chapter 310 Amazing. On this day, we commemorate the hero of humanity, Xiaoyi. President Louis, suppressing his grief, shouted with tears streaming down his face. Everyone shouted in unison, calling out the hero's name. At this moment, amidst the raging storm and dense dark clouds, the shouts piercing the sky became the only melody in this world. Nothing could stop them, nothing could silence their cries. Xiaoyi, deep within the energy beam, suddenly broke free of his body's limitations, and endless energy surged into it. Then, it was rapidly transformed within Xiaoyi's body, becoming purer and more powerful, propelling the energy towards Jupiter, 20 million kilometers away. Under the cleansing force of such powerful energy, Xiaoyi's body could not withstand it. His body began to disintegrate little by little under the wash of energy, as if fragments were slowly falling off. Xiaoyi endured the pain, carrying the ultimate energy, and sped towards Jupiter. President, promoted. Promoted. Amidst everyone's sorrow, one person's joyful shout stood out somewhat out of place. But everyone turned back, a sliver of relief seemingly appearing on their sorrowful faces. They crowded around the screen, watching the energy beam climb ever higher. In less than 10 seconds, the beam would strike Jupiter's hydrogen layer. At that moment, propelled by the force of Jupiter's explosion, Earth would veer off its current orbit and drift into space once more. Under everyone's expectant gaze, the energy beam accelerated rapidly, reaching Jupiter's gravimetric layer in just a few seconds. Excellent, everyone shouted inwardly, hurling insults at each other. But no one dared to shout aloud, for they understood that without success, they had to remain discreet. They couldn't let Xiaoyi's efforts be in vain. Just as the energy beam was about to reach Jupiter, Xiaoyi forcibly detached himself from it. If he entered Jupiter's hydrogen layer, he would truly never return. At that moment, Xiaoyi used the last ounce of energy within him to attack the hydrogen layer, and then, using the recoil, he was propelled backward, rapidly moving away from the hydrogen layer. Shia. Just then, the energy beam struck the hydrogen layer, instantly detonating it and subsequently igniting the entire planet Jupiter. A powerful shockwave swept outwards in all directions, catching up with Xiaoyi in the blink of an eye, and then using this force to push him backward once more. This was tantamount to helping Xiaoyi escape danger. Because of Xiaoyi's physical condition, he could absorb all the energy. The massive shockwave from Jupiter's explosion directly blasted Xiaoyi away, and then, a post-apocalyptic afterglow illuminated the entire sky above the planet. The crowd below reflected countless rays of light in their eyes, each person utterly shocked. They couldn't even imagine how captivating the end of the world could be. But at this moment, beneath the dazzling light, their eyes revealed a trace of sorrow, the grief for Xiaoyi's passing. With his body, he had supported the entire planet, saving all of humanity. In history, no one was worthy of being compared to Xiaoyi. His achievements are unparalleled, unprecedented and unmatched. Everyone, search everywhere, see if you can find anything Xiaoyi left behind, Lewis said solemnly, looking at everyone before him. But everyone knew that entering the energy beams of the planetary engine meant certain death. Finding Xiaoyi's belongings was utterly impossible. The energy shockwave would destroy everything, including clothing and bodies. However, no one objected. Their eyes were filled with determination. They would not give up as long as there was a glimmer of hope. Let's go, one of them waved, leading everyone in all directions. Soon, in the desolate Lois region, a few people were scattered about, taking a stroll. Suddenly, a blur of motion, like a falling meteor, plummeted from the sky, creating a deep crater. This sound immediately drew everyone's attention. For them, this sound stirred the deepest emotions within them. Hearts pounded, and hope filled everyone's eyes. The most likely candidate for something falling from the sky was Xiaoyi. But it could also be a fragment from Jupiter's explosion. Everyone prayed it was Xiaoyi. Soon, everyone rushed over, surrounding the crater in layers. Those outside couldn't see what was happening inside, and those inside couldn't see what was inside either. So, for now, it was still unknown whether it was Xiaoyi or a fragment of Jupiter. Make way, a stern voice rang out, and everyone knew who it was. It could only be Elder Bai. Quickly, a path opened, and Elder Bai and Lewis entered together. Thick smoke and dust filled the air. Elder Bai waved his sleeve, instantly dispelling all obstacles, and only then could they see inside. Xiaoyi lay in the deep pit, covered in dust and dirt. Although he looked extremely disheveled, his incredibly strong body hadn't suffered any serious injury. He just needed some rest. Quickly call the medics, President Lewis shouted to the surrounding area. Everyone was momentarily stunned, not understanding why they needed medics. Then it dawned on them. Xiaoyi wasn't dead. He was alive. He was injured. Medics, quick! Medics! His voice boomed, like a surging wave, carrying the message and shaking the entire sky. Old Bai carefully reached the bottom of the pit and carried Xiaoyi out. Having been directly hit by the energy shockwave, he had no strength left. He needed rest to recover his energy. After all, in this battle, Xiaoyi had used all his life energy. This would have a huge impact on his body. In a daze, Xiaoyi felt a slight movement within his body and slowly opened his eyes. Seeing the familiar face before him, Xiaoyi finally let go of all his worries. Blue Star hadn't been destroyed, and his mission was complete. He could finally live on. Relieved, Xiaoyi finally relaxed and began to rest. All of this was observed by Elder Bai and Louis, but they remained silent, not wanting to disturb Xiaoyi. Let him sleep peacefully and let all his fatigue dissipate. Has the medic arrived? Elder Bai asked the others after carrying Xiaoyi out of the pit. They're here. They're here, a hurried voice approached, reaching everyone's ears. Everyone looked closely and saw a rather young girl. Although she looked quite young, Chen Feng's medical skills were among the best on Blue Star. This time, Chen Feng was the only girl who had come to save Blue Star. Previously, Xiaoyi and the others had tried their best to prevent Chen Feng from coming, but in the end, they couldn't persuade her otherwise and had to let her come along. Only then did everyone realize how fortunate they were to have brought Chen Feng. Chen Feng quickly arrived at Xiaoyi's side and began her diagnosis, applying various medicines and bandages to Xiaoyi's body. The conditions here are limited. We need to take him back as soon as possible. Headquarters has the best medical equipment. As the only doctor, Chen Feng's words carried the most authority. Then hurry up and bring the armored vehicle. Old Bai was also very anxious. Although Xiaoyi had just woken up and didn't seem to have much of a problem, the concern of the others for Xiaoyi was undeniable. In the rush, everyone left the lowest region. What they needed was to return to headquarters. Time passed quickly. Xiaoyi lay on his hospital bed, watching the rising sunlight outside the window with immense joy. As long as Blue Star existed, as long as he was alive, he would never again let anyone else control his life and death. He would firmly grasp his life in his own hands. Tell me, what do you yearn for? Suddenly, a strange voice rang in Xiaoyi's mind. Who? Xiaoyi was extremely vigilant. The visitor was hostile, definitely not a good person. Tell me your desires, and I will grant them. The voice rang out again, but it was utterly devoid of emotion. It was like a greeting from a distant starry sky. The power I desire, you cannot give me. Xiaoyi didn't care, speaking calmly. What he needed was energy capable of overturning the entire world, power that could only control the entire world. Nothing existing in this world could bring him this energy. Just tell me, pass it on to me, and I can give you this power. Xiaoyi didn't waste any words, directly conveying his desire. As soon as this desire was sent out, the voice disappeared, for the first time, it felt fear. Jupiter was destroyed, the world returned to peace, and the clear blue sky was once again displayed before everyone. We survived? We didn't die? Earth didn't explode? Thank goodness, we survived. Alive, alive, we survived. At this moment, the excitement of surviving the catastrophe, the shock, and the joy welling up from the depths of our hearts brought tears of happiness to everyone's eyes. Everyone looked at their loved ones with immense tenderness, tears welling in their eyes, and then, as their eyes met, they tightly embraced those beside them. The emotion suppressed for so long finally erupted, becoming a paradise of happiness. Who stopped this seemingly certain death? The happiness of surviving the catastrophe also surprised many. Who was that person, or that group of people? The general public felt the greatest gratitude towards Xiaoyi and his group at this moment. Although they didn't know who they were, their names, or their appearances, being grateful and silently thanking them was all they could do now. Only those who didn't choose to follow Yi to the lowest region truly understood how monstrous Yi had been. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 311: A Stormy Era. Our choice not to follow him, not to believe him, is perhaps our greatest tragedy. The engineer who had been leading the climber to go home looked at his wife and daughter beside him, his heart filled with mixed emotions. The happiness of surviving the ordeal faded as Xiaoyi's face appeared, replaced by endless regret. If he had chosen to believe Xiaoyi, chosen to go to the lowest region with him, he would now be the savior of Blue Star. His wife and children, and all the people of Blue Star, would have unhesitatingly regarded him as a great hero. However, all of this vanished after choosing to leave, choosing not to believe. Husband, what's wrong? His wife noticed his unusual expression and asked with concern. It's nothing, we're a family, we'll always be together. The man suppressed his regret and looked at his wife and children. Perhaps leaving wasn't the worst decision. After all, he was with the most important people in his world. The man wrapped his arms around his wife and children. At this moment, there were no other emotions, only the relief of life and the deep bond of blood. In the lowest region, SHI.E.L.D. slowly opened his eyes, and the bright sunlight immediately shone into them. Today's sunlight seemed even more dazzling and warm. "You're awake." President Lewis, who had been sitting by the bedside, stood up. His bleary eyes showed that he had just woken up as well. Those brats outside had stayed up for 3 nights just to wait for him to wake up, and yet he only showed up on the 5th day. They were all asleep outside the room. President Lewis looked very happy. Although he was disheveled, he couldn't hide his joy. "Really? Then I woke up at a really bad time." SHI.E.L.D. touched his head and smiled slightly. The people who had no connection before had formed a strong bond after saving Blue Star. Especially SHI.E.L.D., they treated him not just as a friend, but as a benefactor, a savior. They would go through fire and water for him at his word. "By the way, what's happening on Blue Star now?" SHI.E.L.D. turned to look at the bright sunlight outside the window, wanting to know the current situation. Lewis pondered for a moment before continuing. "Most places have returned to calm. Only a small area near the explosion's epicenter is still experiencing aftershocks, but everything is moving in a positive direction. Moss and the space station have returned, leading Blue Star into the deeper reaches of space." With Lewis's explanation, SHI.E.L.D. had a fairly complete understanding of the situation, and the disaster he had anticipated didn't seem to have occurred. Therefore, in this peaceful state, SHI.E.L.D. hoped even more that it was just his imagination and would never happen. "I'll go for a walk too. I've been lying in bed for 5 days, I feel like I'm turning into a mummy," SHI.E.L.D. said self-deprecatingly, feeling his body grow numb. "I'll stay with you," Lewis said, trying to help SHI.E.L.D. up. But SHI.E.L.D. immediately refused. "No need, you've taken care of me for so many days, you must be tired too, go and rest. Besides, you know my body is stronger than yours now." SHI.E.L.D.'s series of words immediately dispelled Lewis's idea of continuing. Nodding, he laid down on the hospital bed and drifted off to sleep. The moment SHI.E.L.D. stepped out of the ward, he was almost startled. Anyone who didn't know better would think they had entered a slum. People were lying on either side of him, densely packed, occupying the entire corridor space. If it were an ordinary person, it would be really difficult to find an angle to walk out. But after 5 days of recuperation, SHI.E.L.D.'s internal energy had been nurtured considerably. So, with the help of his internal strength, he didn't wake the others. He quickly walked outside, and under the warm sunlight, he felt even more comfortable. Although the outside world was still a scene of devastation, it was still incredibly beautiful compared to its previous state of near destruction. Just as SHI.E.L.D. was basking in the sun, a slight sound suddenly echoed in his mind. "Mission, initiate the next phase, entering the era of Star Wars." The sudden voice immediately reminded SHI.E.L.D. of the black-robed figure who had resurrected him. It was incredibly familiar, there was no doubt it was him. But what exactly did this era of Star Wars refer to? SHI.E.L.D. had no idea. And the promised initiation hadn't materialized yet. When would it begin? Everything was so unknown, leaving him completely bewildered. SHI.E.L.D. glanced at the people resting on the ground behind him, and a sense of responsibility welled up within him. Yes, this feeling was something he had never experienced before. From that moment on, SHI.E.L.D. felt he had to protect these people, to protect the entire Blue Star. Was it because he had saved them before? So naturally, the thought arose, I saved them, no one but me is allowed to lay a finger on them. Thinking about this, SHI.E.L.D. almost laughed. Wasn't this a bit too childish? But upon reflection, he realized he truly felt this way. He simply didn't want anyone to do anything detrimental to Blue Star. The sun gradually rose higher, slowly reaching its highest point in the sky, hanging there. But the people in the corridor showed no sign of waking up. SHI.E.L.D. enjoyed the hard-won warmth, feeling a surge of comfort. Turning to look at the sleeping people in the corridor, a pleasant smile appeared on his face. Although he had only been reborn on Blue Star for a short 10 days, SHI.E.L.D. had already considered himself a part of Blue Star. In particular, without realizing it, his sense of belonging and ownership of Blue Star had reached another level. The world returned to peace. Although the international coalition government had not yet regrouped, order was running smoothly under the emergency measures. After spending another 3 days in the hospital, receiving everyone's gratitude and admiration, SHI.E.L.D. felt a little embarrassed. Every day, different people would come to his ward to talk to him, express their gratitude, and discuss their families and situations, like conducting a family survey, telling Xiaoyi everything without reservation. Finally, he could leave. After staying in the hospital for so many days, Xiaoyi felt a pungent smell of alcohol emanating from his body. Although his life energy had largely recovered, and his energy reserves had reached a high level, he still felt unwell after so many days of inactivity, as if he were rusty. As he leaped out of the hospital, the others didn't seem to care. After all, 10 days ago, Xiaoyi had demonstrated to them how to enter and exit an energy shockwave. This unheard of and unprecedented event had clearly occurred before their eyes. Therefore, they showed no surprise at Xiaoyi's extraordinary actions, only a simple "oh, well," without their gasps. Xiaoyi felt quite comfortable. At least in their eyes, he was no longer a freak. Or rather, he had clearly changed humanity's understanding of extraordinary power. Their awe and shock had reached a level of acceptance. If the military power of Blue Star underwent a significant change in the future, they might even thank him. Thinking of this, Xiaoyi left the hospital. He only wanted to go to one place, the Chagan Lake region. The cave and the strange scenery there were things that intrigued him greatly. The lobster monster that appeared on the way to the Lois region, and the shadow encountered there at the end, might both have originated from this cave. Although this was just a conjecture, Xiaoyi was extremely certain that there was a 90% chance it was related. Now that his energy had almost fully recovered, Xiaoyi needed to thoroughly resolve his doubts and see what was causing all this trouble. With his level 20 body and skillful use of life energy, Xiaoyi's speed had increased many times over. He soon arrived at the Chagan Lake region. From the outside, it looked exactly the same as before. But this very appearance only strengthened Xiaoyi's suspicions. Jupiter's powerful gravity had already torn the surface of Earth to shreds. Although the Chagan Lake region was quite far from the Lois region, it wouldn't be completely unscathed, which defied the truth. Therefore, there was only one possibility, and only one possibility: an unknown force was protecting the Chagan Lake region. Even Jupiter's gravity, with such terrifying power, couldn't cause it the slightest damage. What exactly was it? Xiaoyi became increasingly interested. Perhaps it could significantly improve his level. Thinking of this, the corners of Xiaoyi's mouth unconsciously turned up, as if he were plotting some scheme, a sight that sent chills down one's spine. Xiaoyi prepared for a moment, making sure all protective measures were in place to avoid any sudden danger upon entering. But just as Xiaoyi was about to enter the Chagan Lake region, a violent tremor suddenly spread outwards from Chagan Lake as its center. It was as if Chagan Lake had become the epicenter, or rather, the initiator of the tremor. Such terrifying energy fluctuations made it completely impossible for Xiaoyi to enter the Chagan Lake region. Moreover, this change was extremely rapid, suddenly transforming into another form. Energy waves gradually rose from the center of the Chagan Lake region, or rather, its heartland. Then, at a rapid speed, they transformed into a constantly rotating energy ring. Suddenly hovering in the air, it spun rapidly, causing the world to churn with dark clouds, as if the end of the world was approaching. Xiaoyi could clearly sense that the energy in the surrounding world was being rapidly drawn into the energy ring, constantly expanding. Every second, the energy ring expanded, visibly engulfing the Chagan Lake region. Answer to Chapter 312. What the hell is this? Even someone as calm as Xiaoyi was experiencing violent emotional fluctuations at this moment, unable to help but curse. They had just resolved the Jupiter problem, and now another disaster, no less difficult than the Jupiter mission, had struck. Was this some kind of death trap? But Xiaoyi's roars and curses couldn't change anything. The energy ring continued to spin, expanding rapidly in all directions. In just 5 seconds, Xiaoyi was completely surrounded by the ring, with no chance to fight back, forced to enter. But once inside the energy ring, Xiaoyi felt an energy as vast as the ocean, instantly engulfing him. In this pure and immense energy, Xiaoyi's entire body was thoroughly cleansed and purified. Impurities that hadn't been detected before were washed away in this moment. Xiaoyi experienced a profound sublimation. Although his strength didn't increase, with the impurities being expelled from his body, his overall strength was elevated to a whole new level. When the energy circulates, it will be much faster and smoother, and its purity will be several times higher than before. This is the benefit of clearing impurities from the body, even more so than the increase in strength itself. It doesn't seem dangerous. During his time in the energy ring, Yi didn't feel any discomfort or detect any danger. Or perhaps, this is another evolution of Blue Star? Xiaoyu keenly sensed this. Could it be that a higher stage of Blue Star is about to arrive? Although he didn't know exactly what it was, for Xiaoyu, this was an opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime chance. He had to seize it. Spatial rifts, no wonder they existed in the Chagan Lake region, there were traces to them after all. Every Blue Star person felt completely different from before. The energy around them quickly entered their bodies, like a vacuum cleaner, sweeping out all the impurities, leaving them feeling much more refreshed. Moreover, due to the overwhelming energy, and the fact that none of the Earthlings had ever experienced such an energy baptism, most of the energy remained within their bodies after entering. At this moment, everyone experienced a significant improvement in their vision, hearing, and fist strength. This was an obvious and dramatic change, leaving everyone somewhat bewildered, yet forced to accept it, as their weak bodies were simply unable to withstand this evolution. Everyone desperately wanted to know what had happened. However, those around them could not answer their questions. They could only accept this baptism, like everyone else, without resistance. Old Bai and Lewis were still standing together, having entered from the same point. Is this what you meant by not necessarily a cultural disaster? Lewis seemed to have swallowed a puff of smoke, his face appearing somewhat pale. Judging by this, it must be. Old Bai was also amazed by such unfathomable methods, nodding mechanically. What's your opinion? Or do you know anything about it? Lewis's right hand trembled as he raised it, as if to take another drag of his cigarette, but his hands were already empty. I don't know. This is a field we can't even begin to understand, it's far beyond their reach. Old Bai remained relatively calm, not losing his composure or thinking due to the sudden upheaval. Then, what should we do? Lewis still had his sense of responsibility as president. Even leaders like them, who were beyond human comprehension, were so panicked. What about the ordinary civilians at the bottom of society? They must be even more terrified now, trapped in deep fear. One wrong move could cause incredibly serious damage. Lewis didn't want a Blue Star, which had been painstakingly rebuilt, to suffer irreparable harm because of this relatively minor upheaval. Xin Yi, that's right, find Yi. I think he definitely has a way to solve this. Old Bai's expression suddenly changed, and he became unusually agitated. He kept turning left and right, as if searching for a suitable direction. Yi, yes, he will definitely understand, but where do we go to find him? The biggest problem was the location of the former Yi. After all, after Xiaoyu left the hospital, he hadn't revealed his whereabouts at all, meaning that no one in the world knew Xiaoyu's location. Don't panic, calm down, think about it, where exactly will you go? Old Bai tried to calm himself down, but the swirling thoughts in his mind prevented him from settling down. Chagan Lake region, yes, in the Chagan Lake region, Lewis shouted loudly, instantly triggering a deep realization in Old Bai's heart. A sudden realization dawned on him. That's right, Xiaoyu will definitely go to the Chagan Lake region. Jupiter appeared after Xiaoyu entered the Chagan Lake region and then descended upon Earth. And this energy ring, according to speculation, was also initiated in the Chagan Lake region. TCH, it all seems so real. Let's go to the Chagan Lake region. Blue Star hadn't changed, it was just in another universe. Although there were no more sophisticated instruments or the sun's guidance, Old Bai, who had spent years in the Chagan Lake region and at headquarters, knew the route to the Chagan Lake region intimately. This path was deeply imprinted in his body, he knew which way to go with just one step. Armored vehicle, drive the armored vehicle, it'll be faster. When Old Man Bai grabbed Lewis's sleeve, Lewis shouted anxiously, flailing his arms and legs, trying to break free from Old Man Bai's grasp. But Old Bai simply said, armored vehicles aren't as fast as me, a simple sentence, yet it stirred up 1,000 waves in Lewis's heart. This is fucking monstrous. Just a change of environment and he's already this powerful? Lewis could already foresee the extent to which his strength and status would improve. Those who mastered science and technology might be forced to exit the stage of the era, completely forgotten in the annals of history. Ahead of Chagan Lake, Xiaoyu's frenzied absorption of energy had completely stopped. His strength had reached level 25, he had to stop and consolidate it properly, otherwise it would have a very negative impact on his future strength improvement. Is this what you call Star Wars? Xiaoyu looked up at the sky, his face gloomy, making one wonder if there were other star systems in this expanse. Perhaps there were, perhaps not. In short, it depended on whether that person would reappear. Congratulations on obtaining Star Wars qualification. Your first mission will begin in 20 days. Please prepare. A hollow voice suddenly rang in Xiao Yi's mind. But this emotionless sentence gave Xiao Yi a headache. Was there really no information or warning? Were they just sending him straight to the battlefield? Wasn't that just cannon fodder? Just as Xiao Yi was cursing, a voice rang in his mind again. A flood of information rushed into Xiao Yi's mind, causing him to clutch his head in pain. Zutek, he cursed, venting his frustration. Then, like a dam bursting, the information shut down immediately. So sudden and unexpected, Xiao Yi couldn't react at all, completely bewildered. Holy crap! No way! When Xiao Yi saw the first message, he couldn't help but curse. This is too real, little blue. Is this how I'm supposed to address you from now on? 2.9 Xiao Yi looked down and, using the communication method he'd been given, tried to contact it. Daddy! 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 The childlike cries made Xiao Yi quickly pull back, his heart still pounding. What the hell is this? A little kid? And it's calling me daddy right away? Xiao Yi rubbed his forehead, looking helpless. What is all this? Wasn't it supposed to help me? Why did it send me a little brat? What good is it? Playing with eggs? Hurry, I get that? Xiao Yi took a deep breath, deciding to put the little brat aside for now, read the message, and then try to communicate with it. That way, perhaps the effect and result would be very different. At least, he wouldn't just hear those two words. Xiao Yi was so astonished by the sheer scale of the situation that he didn't even notice Elder Bai and Louis had already arrived before him. Elder Bai's outstretched right hand suddenly froze in midair, unsure whether to disturb Xiao Yi. After all, the world had undergone such a massive change, and no one knew whether Xiao Yi was also undergoing a physical transformation. Any mishap would be unbearable for anyone. You've arrived. Just as Elder Bai and Louis were at a loss, Xiao Yi slowly opened his eyes, his pupils already slightly bloodshot. Receiving all the information was no easy task, even for Xiao Yi, who was already at level 25. The main reason was that his mental strength was not strong enough. Because below level 35, the improvement in strength was mainly reflected in the physical level. The real improvement in mental strength would only occur after level 35. You must want to know what kind of changes have occurred in the world, right? Xiao Yi's words hit the nail on the head regarding Elder Bai and Louis's deepest anxieties. The two nodded repeatedly like sheikhs, setting aside their imposing presence in front of Xiao Yi. This was because Xiao Yi was far superior to them in both strength and surveillance capabilities. The world's changes, as you've guessed, are due to an anomaly in the Chagan Lake region. However, I don't know the specific reasons yet. Perhaps time will give us the answer, but until then, let's not speculate, Xiao Yi said slowly. These words essentially calmed Elder Bai and Louis down. At least they hadn't heard too much bad news, meaning that this upheaval had a positive aspect for the people of Blue Star. Chapter 313. As for where this cataclysmic change will lead Earth, it ultimately depends on us. As long as we become strong, we can rebuild a new world, even more magnificent and glorious. Xiao Yi's words resonated deeply, instantly igniting the passion within both of them. Xiao Yi's words completely reassured them. The world may indeed have changed, but it also had an incredibly powerful leader like Xiao Yi. Under his leadership, Elder Bai and Louis firmly believed that the world would be far stronger and more spectacular than it was during the time of the Wandering Earth. So, how should we convey this message to the other Blue Star people? They might still be in a state of confusion, and without proper guidance, they might go in a bad direction. Louis pointed out immediately what Yu was worried about at this stage: ordinary Blue Star people, who are already at the bottom of the world and whose information is always out of reach. If they go in the opposite direction, it will be a huge undertaking. First, spread the word about my saving Blue Star, and then, in my name, spread this information to all Blue Star people, Xiao Yi said quickly. In fact, this was the first solution he considered after receiving the information. He could only rely on his powerful influence, in the name of a savior, to firmly grasp all Blue Star people in his hands. After all, from now on, Xiao Yi was completely united with Blue Star and its people. To become strong, he had to ensure the strength of Blue Star and its continued survival. Especially the future interstellar war, that would be the real test. Without the help of others, he could only rely on himself and Blue Star. Especially now, Blue Star is merely at the lowest level of analysis, which is simply not enough to compare. This This is too. After reading the information Xiaoyu gave them, Elder Bai and Lewis were completely shocked. This is too terrifying. Blue Star may truly be separated from the Blue Star of the past forever. But this also means that a stronger, more magnificent Blue Star is about to be born in their hands. They are the first generation to witness the change of Blue Star, and they will be the group that protects Blue Star forever. Xiaoyu, there's no mistake, right? Elder Bai's trembling hands and expectant eyes made his expression extremely contradictory. Lewis stood to the side, with the same expression. For them, this was a level that Blue Star could never reach or even dream of before. But now, it was so clearly laid out before them, how could they not be tempted? How could they not have doubts? Could what I'm giving you be wrong? Xiaoyu asked dismissively. Then their doubts were completely dispelled. Xiaoyu would never lie to them about this, and judging from the changes in the surrounding environment, it couldn't be wrong. Okay, I'll go and make all the information public to Blue Star. Lewis nodded vigorously, declaring his loyalty. After that, Elder Bai's eyes also changed. Although he didn't say anything, he pounded his right fist heavily on his chest, which expressed his meaning. Following Xiaoyu was not only the trend of the times and the trend of history, but also the only correct choice at this stage. But here, all the communication equipment seems to have been destroyed. How are we going to tell people all over the world? After calming down, Lewis suddenly froze. He wasn't strong enough. Without the help of wireless communication, he couldn't complete the task Xiaoyu had given him. And now, many people's communication equipment is also damaged, right? How are they going to receive our information? Elder Bai also asked appropriately. These two problems were suddenly placed in front of the two of them, and they couldn't solve them at all. Since I proposed this method, then I have made all the preparations, Xiaoyu said calmly. But what he said shocked and filled them with even greater admiration. To achieve this without radio, it was terrifying. Old Bai and Lewis couldn't possibly fathom how Xiaoyu had managed to make the communication device function. But in any case, Xiaoyu's words were undoubtedly true. Xiaoyu slowly walked to them, his hands moving gently like he was practicing Tai Chi. Immediately, they felt a tremendous change in the energy flow around them. It was as if a giant tornado was sweeping in all the surrounding energy. But Old Bai and Lewis, standing beside Xiaoyu, felt no discomfort whatsoever. In fact, their bodies seemed to tremble with a faint sense of joy. It was a thirst for energy, an eager absorption. As a large amount of energy surged into Xiaoyu's body, he felt an indescribable sense of happiness, but this was only temporary. Because Xiaoyu discovered that soon his body stopped absorbing energy, as if it had reached a peak. Damn, so fast. Xiaoyu was slightly annoyed, especially seeing everyone else absorbing the energy of this world with such ease. Look at these people, Xiaoyu muttered to himself. But looking at the group before him, a strange thought suddenly arose in Xiaoyu's mind. Why did this world bring them all here? Wouldn't it have been enough to just bring him? Bringing them all here would require even more energy to sustain them. What troubled Xiaoyu most was what they wanted from bringing these earthlings here. Giving them benefits, allowing them to cultivate and improve their physiques, without charging any fees was absolutely impossible. In this dog-eat-dog universe, no one would generously offer favors. Otherwise, why did the Trisolarans, upon discovering Earth, so eagerly prepare a plan to conquer it and gain dominion? This was the most important point, otherwise, these people wouldn't even know how they died. Thinking this, Xiao Chen looked up at the sky, but as always, all he saw was the magnificent sea of stars, nothing else. What are you? What do you want from me? But on this planet, no one answered Xiaoyu, no one would give him an answer. In the end, only the Blue Star inhabitants, still greedily absorbing energy, remained on this land with Xiaoyu. Silence. Deathly silence. Boy, do you want to know the answer? Suddenly, an extremely unfamiliar voice rang in Xiaoyu's ears. Who are you? Xiaoyu was startled. Because this person's arrival was without any warning, like a ghost. In other words, this person's strength far surpassed Xiaoyu's. Don't worry about who I am. You'll naturally find out the answer later, but for now, perhaps we should start a new game. The voice rang out again, but with an undeniable air. Why should I listen to you? Xiaoyu wouldn't give in so easily. If he wanted to know everything, he had to rely on his own strength. Even if you can't have it now, you can't just submit to others like this. Otherwise, you'll be stuck under someone else's thumb for the rest of your life, never having a chance to rise above others. Everyone who comes here says the same thing. You're just like them. The voice revealed endless sarcasm, then suddenly changed, becoming extremely sharp. But in the end, they all obediently did as I said. Can you bear the consequences of your anger? The last hint of cold laughter in the voice was completely mocking Xiao Yi. Were there others brought here by him? Xiao Yi quickly grasped a very useful piece of information. If there were other people who had been captured here, why hadn't he noticed them? There was only one possibility: he wasn't on the same planet as them. The others who had been captured here must have been assigned to different locations. But what was the purpose of doing that? Xiao Yi couldn't think any further, because it was completely beyond his comprehension. It seems my little hint has made you think. Believe me, as long as you cooperate with me, you can get more information later. Whether you know the final answer depends on your ability. The voice rang out again, as if it could see right through Xiao Yi, completely arrogant. Speak, what do you want me to do? Xiao Yi was extremely cautious and would never agree easily. Otherwise, he would truly become a fish on a chopping block, at the mercy of others. Still so alert? What I want you to do is extremely simple, and after success, there will be extremely rich revenge, more than enough for you to support these people. Saying this, Xiao Yi suddenly turned to look at the others, only to find that they were still immersed in the joy of absorbing energy. Their bodies couldn't withstand so much energy. If they continued to absorb it, you should know what the consequences would be, right? Human bombs exploding, isn't that exciting? The cold, piercing voice rang out again, causing a surge of anger to rise in Xiao Yi's heart. Although these earthlings didn't have much to do with him, in the end, it was he who brought them here. If you were to let them all die here, and die in front of him, in such a cruel way, Xiao Yi would never agree to it. You're quite something, but I don't think I'll submit to you because of that. Xiao Yi's expression was serious, completely restraining himself and radiating unparalleled power. Believe me, you're not qualified to continue. This matter isn't so simple, only a true genius can accomplish the task I gave them. The voice rang out again, but it sounded extremely arrogant. I'm sorry, I am the genius you speak of, or rather, I am the genius among geniuses. Chapter 314 Energy Waves. Xiao Chen unconsciously muttered to himself. He was quite self-aware of his own strength. Having been reborn twice, especially the first time, he almost became the sole venerable one in the Marvel world. Such power wasn't something everyone could achieve. Only he had ever done it. And to be reborn a second time, such luck was unmatched. He was a Superman, a combination of talent and luck. Tell me, what exactly do you want me to do? Xiao Chen asked directly. But you have to guarantee these people won't die, Xiao Chen continued. He didn't want to return to find a field of corpses, turned into tomato sauce. In this desolate and lonely place, Xiao Chen wanted at least a few people to talk to. After all, even as a powerful person, one couldn't immerse oneself in cultivation all the time, otherwise, one might go insane. Don't worry, I won't let your earthlings die before your first assessment is over. After all, they're quite amusing, aren't they? Ignorant, aren't they? A cold laugh echoed in his voice again, as if he were the god of the universe. Let's begin. Xiao Yi didn't want to wait any longer and went straight to the point. It seems you figured it out. Very well, we can begin any time. But before that, I must tell you something. Be prepared and get yourself into top condition. Otherwise, you might not even pass the preliminary test. These words surprised Xiao Yi somewhat. He hadn't expected this person to care so much about him. It was completely unlike his usual style. I just don't want a hard-won genius to be wasted like this, and it's because of factors other than strength. The explanation came quickly. But for Xiao Yi, these words were enough, because he did have some doubts about what he would have to go through to enter this test. Be prepared. Don't worry, I won't break my promise to these people. These words completely dispelled the last trace of doubt in Xiao Yi's heart. If these earthlings died as soon as he entered, that would be incredibly irresponsible. Go in, but make sure you're in top condition, that your energy and spirit are at their peak. Once again, this was a serious reminder. From these two reminders, Xiao Yi understood a crucial point. In their eyes, he wasn't a dispensable pawn to be discarded at any time. At least, they valued his life. Perhaps it was because bringing him from Earth had been a costly affair, or perhaps his talent was considered high level by their standards. But whatever the reason, at least he now had leverage to negotiate with him. Especially if he survived this trial, he would have even greater influence. Let me in, I can't wait. Having grasped this, Xiao Yi relaxed, focusing his breathing and gathering his energy. His aura suddenly shifted, as if he were a completely different person. Very good, I need you to maintain this state. Go in. Seeing Xiao Yi's state, the man sounded extremely excited, laughing heartily. Suddenly, a large gate opened in the empty void. The two gates exuded an extremely simple and ancient aura, yet subtly revealed a magnificent and awe-inspiring grandeur. Xiao Yi, seeing this gate, sensed something amiss, and became even more cautious. This situation was undoubtedly extremely dangerous. To successfully escape, he would need to unleash even greater power. Without much hesitation, Xiao Yi waited 2 seconds before stepping through the gate. As Xiao Yi entered, the two ancient gates closed. A muffled thud echoed in the air. But it failed to awaken the blue star inhabitants immersed in the warm energy. You people will definitely play a very important role in the future. Of all the people who came, I never expected someone could actually do this. Could it be that he saved that planet? After muttering a few words to himself, the person disappeared from the land. In its place, a huge net enveloped the entire planet, and from the outside, the people inside appeared to be sleeping peacefully. Meanwhile, Xiao Yi, who had entered through the gate, finally understood something: why that person had kept emphasizing maintaining his condition. At this moment, Xiao Yi landed outside a large mountain. A thick fog shrouded the entire ridge, only its outline vaguely visible. This fog showed no sign of dissipating. Moreover, a mysterious force was guiding Xiao Yi deeper into the mountain. This tense driving force, even subtly giving me dangerous hints. Is it really true? Xiao Yi didn't feel any danger around him. Instead, he felt a sense of peace. However, since it was giving such a frantic hint, it meant that he couldn't stay here for long. Xiao Yi wasn't a fool. Since he was on someone else's turf, and someone else was offering seemingly kind reminders, he figured he could abide by the rules of the game. Xiao Chen didn't linger. He mobilized some of his internal energy to ensure his speed in entering the mountains wasn't too slow. He also needed to maintain a suitable level of energy to avoid being caught off guard and having no chance to fight back. Come on, let me see what's different here. Xiao Chen quickly disappeared into the hazy mist. Along the way, he encountered no danger. Instead, it was as if a wide road had been cleared, leading Xiao Yi deeper into the mountains. Soon, Xiao Yi was guided to a huge lake. For some reason, looking at the shimmering lake water, Xiao Yi felt a strong sense of longing. It was as if he had an extreme thirst for energy. He didn't know what was in this lake yet, so caution was advised. Xiao Chen tried his best to suppress the greed within him and slowly observed the lake. After observing for a while, Xiao Yi still couldn't detect anything different. On the contrary, that feeling of greed grew stronger, as if it wanted to devour him entirely, a thirst for powerful energy, a pursuit of immense strength. Damn. Is there really no problem? Xiao Yi kept asking himself this, trying to stay calm. He couldn't let a moment of carelessness lead him into someone else's trap. Especially since that person had previously reminded him to maintain absolute focus. Back off. Back off. Back off. We must back off. Xiao Chen suppressed his inner desire and forced himself to move backward. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Although it was extremely painful, and he felt like he was being tortured, for Xiao Chen, doing so was absolutely the right thing to do. Swoosh. Suddenly, the lake water changed dramatically, like a giant wave rushing out from the bottom of the lake, splashing boundless water, like a sky-covering sea curtain, threatening to engulf everything around. Damn it, I knew it was a trap. At this moment, Xiao Chen had regained his senses, or rather, because the lake's deceptive power had diminished. The energy within his body, which had been maintaining a good balance, suddenly stabilized. For him, absolute focus was now the most important thing. Roar. A giant beast resembling the kryptonite suddenly burst out from the bottom of the lake, startling Xiao Chen. When Xiao Chen saw the monster's true form, he was completely dumbfounded because this monster actually looked somewhat familiar. It seems to be a monster from the primordial era, that water dragon, one of the mounts under the command of Taoist Duobao. He has always kept it at the bottom of the lake, where it usually rests quietly and rarely comes out directly. Could it be that I've really arrived in the primordial world? Xiao Yi's mind was a blur. He wasn't sure if he was actually in the primordial world. But the man's words gave him the feeling that he could take him to another world at any time. Maybe he really had been brought to the primordial world. Looking at the water monster in front of him and the different scenery around him, He suddenly remembered how he had entered the primordial world before. It was that time that he was brought into the primordial world and started a new journey. Speaking of which, he had actually interacted with Pangu, the 7 ancestral witches, and Nuwa, among others. Let's see if you can pose a danger to me. Xiao Yi's lips curled up slightly, and he looked extremely confident. If this water monster couldn't pose any danger to him, then he could say that he was completely capable of surviving in this primordial world. Alright, let's see who is the strongest one. Roar. Seeing that Xiao Yi showed no fear and showed no intention of fleeing, the water monster became enraged. It hurled a portion of the lake water into the air, creating a massive wave that crashed down on Xiao Yi. HMPH. Child's play. A confident glint flashed in Xiao Yi's eyes. In the blink of an eye, he vanished from his spot. The next instant, a figure emerged from the wave like a long sword cleaving through a giant curtain, flashing with blinding light. Roar. Seeing Xiao Yi emerge from the wave, the water monster opened its blood-red maw and lunged to swallow him whole. Dare to open your mouth? You want to die? Suddenly, a long sword materialized in Xiao Yi's hand, formed from invisible energy waves. Roar. A huge cylindrical column of water erupted from the water monster's mouth. Chapter 315 Spiritual Energy. The overwhelming aura caused Xiao Yi to feel a tremor. It was as if the void itself had been pierced by the water column. I thought it was something special. It's just a magical attack. Xiao Yi grinned, a cold smile appearing on his lips. Then, he merged with his sword, seemingly becoming one with the sword god, and charged straight at the water column. Boom. The moment the two collided, a tremendous tremor shook the heavens and earth, as if the entire world had been shattered. It's actually quite powerful. Above, in the temple where Taoist Duabao resided, 2 people were watching the battle between Xiao Yi and the water monster below. It seems Xiao Qi hasn't been cultivating seriously lately. He can't even beat a human. We'll have to teach him a lesson later. A little boy beside Taoist Duabao suddenly spoke up. Ha, if Xiao Qi heard you say that, he'd definitely want to fight you. Taoist Duabao laughed upon hearing the little boy's words. He let the 2 of them be, not interfering too much. After all, their constant competition was beneficial for them to reach higher realms. However, for Xiao Qi, it was always the one who got angry. After all, it couldn't effectively contend with the little boy, whether in terms of combat power or words. But Xiao Qi had one advantage. It had an indomitable spirit, repeatedly losing but never giving up. This spirit was extremely rare. You must know that as a spirit beast, it had extremely high self-esteem, especially in battles. Losing was like being trampled underfoot, which was completely intolerable. Keep watching. Xiao Qi isn't as bad as you say. He should be able to fight back. Taoist Duabao composed himself and continued to watch the battle between the 2 below with great interest. If Xiao Qi loses, I'll go down and fight him. We can't let him lose face. The little boy waved his fist, his tone leaving no room for argument. Aren't you bullying him? He just finished a battle. Master Duabao was somewhat surprised by the little boy's serious expression. It seemed his relationship with Xiao Qi was a love-hate one. The deeper the love, the fiercer the fight. Master Duabao immediately recalled the battles between the little boy and Xiao Qi, both of which were fights to the death. They wouldn't stop until the opponent was forced to admit defeat. Regardless, Xiao Qi lost, so I'm going to go down and teach him a lesson. The little boy ignored Master Duabao's advice and spoke bluntly. There was no point in saying anything more here. Sigh. Another silly boy has finally arrived. Will he really leave me with psychological trauma? Master Duabao sighed slightly. But then he thought, he had many ways to not only keep the boy alive but also make him incredibly grateful. Thinking about it that way, it didn't seem like a bad deal. But remember, just defeat him, don't kill him outright, understand? At this moment, it seemed that Taoist Duabao could only indulge the little boy's behavior. I know, Master, I'm very careful with my strength, otherwise, how could little 7 be alive and well until now? Hearing the little boy's words, Taoist Duabao was truly at a loss for words. What he said seemed to make perfect sense. But upon closer examination, one could see how pitiful little 7 was. Fortunately, it was a spirit beast, with thick skin and flesh, so it couldn't be killed in one blow. Little 7, you really are a fool. Taoist Duabao finally stopped looking at the gritting-teethed little boy and seriously observed the battle between little 7 and Xiao Yi. Little water monster, if it weren't for your thick skin and flesh, I would have already beaten you to pulp. Xiaoyi suddenly slashed at Little Seven's back with his sword, continuing his endless taunts. "You stinky human, you're so annoying. I'll teach you a lesson." Little Seven, hearing Xiaoyi's taunts, was completely bewildered and didn't know what to say. After all, the little boy before him wasn't as skilled at taunting as Xiaoyi. The battle between Xiaoyi and the water monster was extremely intense, with their back-and-forth exchanges being incredibly exciting. The water monster, relying on its thick hide, wasn't afraid of Xiaoyi's attacks at all, and Xiaoyi's attacks were also blocked by the water monster's powerful defense. If it weren't for his agility, he wouldn't have been able to contend with the water monster at all. However, after a while, Xiaoyi gained the upper hand, using his tenacious nature to constantly wear down the water monster's patience. Finally, the water monster, Xiaoki, had to give up the fight because its energy was insufficient to continue. "Ha ha ha, looks like you're still just a piece of trash. You think you can fight me? Dream on." Seeing the water monster Xiaoki enter the lake, Xiaoyi immediately followed, as the dense energy inside still greatly shocked him. "My god, the spiritual energy here is so abundant, it's almost turning into trickles of water." Boom. In just a few breaths, Xiaoyi's spiritual energy reached its peak, eager to break through to the next realm. My goodness, feeling the vast, river-like spiritual energy around him, Xiaoyi couldn't help but sigh. Compared to the Azure Cloud sect, this place was like heaven and earth, an insurmountable chasm. No wonder the primordial world had so many powerful figures, including several saints. The sheer density of spiritual energy alone was enough to nurture them. The kind of powerful figures a world could produce depended not only on talent but, more importantly, on its potential. For example, in the Doppelganger world, without origin key, even a deity couldn't be cultivated. Looking at the primordial world, Xiaoyi immediately sat down cross-legged, circulating the 9 revolutions profound technique he had just acquired, frantically absorbing the surrounding spiritual energy. He was only allowed half a day here, a fact deeply etched in his mind. So, after a slight surprise, Xiaoyi seized every moment to cultivate frantically. He had to grasp this rare opportunity. The 9 revolutions profound technique is a cultivation method practiced by the great god Pangu in the primordial world, so it is naturally very suitable for this place. Therefore, Xiaoyi's absorption speed is extremely fast, and the meridians in his body are running wildly, turning the absorbed spiritual energy into his own use. With a thunderous roar, Xiaoyi's spiritual energy surged, gradually reaching a critical point and propelling him towards the divine power realm. Without the enlightenment flower, can I break the curse of the 9-aperture exquisite body? A sense of unease gripped Xiaoyi. He didn't know if he could break through to the divine power realm. In the history of the Shiinian continent, the 9-aperture exquisite body had appeared several times. Some successfully entered the divine power realm, while others were trapped in the bitter sea realm for their entire lives. Without exception, those who entered the divine power realm relied on the enlightenment flower, while those trapped in the bitter sea realm never obtained one. Historically, it was indeed impossible to enter the divine power realm without the enlightenment flower. However, it was important to note that those were all in fantasy worlds. Xiaoyi was now in the primordial world. 2 completely different worlds, 2 completely different planes. The results were likely to be different as well. With this belief, Xiaoyi circulated the 9 revolutions profound technique even more rapidly, gathering the surrounding river-like spiritual energy into his body. Gradually, a massive tornado coalesced around Xiaoyi's body, gathering boundless spiritual energy. The overwhelming power of this spiritual energy was awe-inspiring. With the appearance of this spiritual energy tornado, the surrounding spiritual pressure also surged violently, seemingly shattering space itself. Anyone who approached would be instantly reduced to dust. At this moment, Xiaoyi, at the very center of the tornado, was completely unaware of what was happening around him, simply frantically absorbing spiritual energy. After entering the primordial world, Yi's 9 apertures exquisite body seemed to have found its home. Previously, he could only open one aperture to absorb spiritual energy in the fantasy world, but now all 9 were open, absorbing spiritual energy like a whale swallowing water. Under such terrifying absorption of spiritual energy, Xiaoyi's strength had already reached the peak of the bitter sea realm. However, when he tried to break through this barrier and enter the divine power realm, he was blocked by an invisible and powerful force. The vast amount of spiritual energy surged forth, but could only create slight ripples before disappearing completely. Over time, Xiaoyi's expression became quite grave, His brows furrowed. I must break through it, Xiaoyu shouted in his heart. Entering the primordial world was like giving him a chance to break through to the divine power realm. If he didn't seize it now, he might never have the chance again when he returned to the Xiantian continent. The Enlightenment Flower was an extremely rare divine medicine, only appearing in various forbidden lands and extremely dangerous places. The only place in the fantasy world that could give Xiaoyu the Enlightenment Flower was Qingshan, who was secretly killed by Xuandu in the Xuanshan secret realm. Therefore, even with the strongest villain system, returning to the fantasy world was full of uncertainty. Charge, Jiao Ju shouted, and the energy of the first to be exhausted struck the barrier. Even though that invisible and powerful force was blocking him, shattering the hope in Xiaoyu's heart time and time again, he still persisted in his attack. Not enough, come again. The vast energy in his body was dissipated by that invisible force in just 1 minute, almost driving him to despair. But Xiaoyu did not lose heart. Instead, his competitive spirit was ignited. Come on, who's afraid of who? The 9 revolutions profound technique swiftly began to circulate, unleashing a tornado of spiritual energy around him that swept across a radius of tens of meters. Dense spiritual energy, like a long river, roared in and merged into the storm. Initially, the energy range was only a few hundred meters in diameter, but gradually it expanded to several thousand meters, then tens of thousands of meters. Xiaoyu was like a bottomless pit, frantically absorbing the incoming spiritual energy. This endless spiritual energy transformed into deep blue waves, relentlessly and angrily crashing into Xiaoyu's body. Even a demon god from the primordial world would likely be unable to withstand such an onslaught. Chapter 316 Time Travel. But Xiaoyu, possessing the 9-aperture exquisite body, thrived amidst this terrifying surge of spiritual energy, absorbing the ever-flowing energy with insatiable hunger. Bang! Bang! The vast spiritual energy within his body transformed into a massive, ferocious force, crashing against a barrier, unleashing its immense power. After an hour of this overwhelming spiritual energy, Xiaoyu's blood began to boil, and clear, melodious sounds emanated from his bones. The barrier that had been blocking his path, the barrier that had bound his realm, finally began to loosen. This was the change brought about by the spiritual energy from tens of thousands of meters within his body flowing into Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu felt the endless spiritual energy within him, as comfortable as soaking in a hot spring. Bang! Crack! With a crisp cracking sound, the barrier shattered, and spiritual energy surged in like a flood bursting its banks. Xiaoyu couldn't help but cry out, every pore on his body opening slightly, an indescribable comfort washing over him. After breaking through this barrier, Xiaoyu's body secreted a foul stench, and the spiritual energy within him completely transformed into liquid state, a hallmark of the divine power realm, condensing ki into liquid. From then on, the power within his body was no longer spiritual energy, but a vast and boundless spiritual sea. The bitter sea realm opens up a space within the body to contain spiritual energy, while the divine power realm condenses spiritual energy into spiritual liquid, turning the bitter sea into true spiritual sea. Xiaoyu felt an unprecedented sense of ease, as if a surging power was flowing within him, like a turbulent wave, ready to burst forth at any moment. The profound power emanating from his meridians felt as if he could shatter a mountain with a single punch. Powerful. So powerful. This is the feeling of power. Even cultivators of the same realm would be no match for me. Having broken through the shackles of the 9-aperture exquisite body, Xiaoyu felt an inexhaustible supply of power throughout his body, and a sense of confidence inexplicably welled up within him. How much time has passed? Slowly opening his hazy eyes, a stench instantly filled Xiaoyu's nostrils, making him nauseous. He staggered, his clothes ripping apart, revealing his body shrouded in black filth. Without time to consider how much time remained, Xiaoyu dashed forward, instantly arriving at a lake and leaping into the water. Whoosh, so refreshing. Before Xiaoyu could even properly soak in the water, a powerful force surged into his body, leaving him stunned. This lake water, what incredible energy! It was even more concentrated than the spiritual energy of the outside world. Slightly shocked, Xiaoyu activated the 9 revolutions profound technique, hovering in the lake water, rapidly absorbing its boundless energy. Xiaoyu's aura grew stronger and stronger. First level of divine power. Second level of divine power. Third level of divine power. After breaking through to the divine power realm, it was as if a black hole had been created within him, with mountains and seas of energy pouring in, all absorbed by his 9-aperture exquisite body. Below the divine power realm, Xiao Yi's cultivation required only 10 times more energy than someone with an ordinary physique. But now, having entered the divine power realm, the energy he needed was as vast as the sea. As imposing as a mountain, terrifyingly so. Xiao Yi, suspended in the lake with his eyes closed, rapidly absorbed the energy within. Below him, a massive vortex seemed to form, endless energy constantly gathering within it. If anyone were to see Xiao Yi here now, their jaws would drop in astonishment. A thick layer of white crystal covered his body, freezing him completely like ice. The aura emanating from this white crystal was terrifyingly powerful, like an energy block descending from the heavens, imprisoning the entire space. Even experts above the divine power realm couldn't step inside, they would be repelled by this energy. Within the crystal, Xiao Yi's breathing was extremely steady, like a meditating monk. Simultaneously, his body began to become translucent and radiant to the extreme. Ice-like skin and jade-like bones, flawless white. This was the mark of his physical body reaching its peak. Unexpectedly, the body, which hadn't reached its peak in the physical realm, was trending towards invincibility in the divine power realm. Actually, it wasn't too surprising. Before reaching the divine power realm, the 9-aperture exquisite body was only a few dozen times stronger than an ordinary physique, not much different from those with powerful bodies or innate spiritual bodies. However, once it broke through the bitter sea and entered the divine power realm, it began to show its potential and power. Before the bitter sea and after reaching the divine power realm, the 9-aperture exquisite body was completely different. This was also why He Qingshan risked everything to go to the Xuantian secret realm to help Xiao Yi find the enlightenment flower. There was no other reason than that once the 9-aperture exquisite body broke through to the divine power realm, it would become invincible. Unfortunately, Qingshan failed to achieve his goal and died in the Xuantian secret realm. Such is the impermanence of life. Xiao Yi in the lake didn't care about the outside world, he had reached the most crucial moment, about to break through to the 9th level of the divine power realm in one fell swoop. Inside the Jade Pillar Cave on Zhongnan Mountain, Yun's Hongzi frowned slightly, gazing into the distance. He stroked his beard, lost in thought. Who dares to cultivate in my immortal Jade Lake? With a flash, Yun's Hongzi transformed into a streak of light, disappearing from the cave in an instant, rushing towards Xiao Yi's location at such a speed that no one could even catch a glimpse of him. After defeating Xiao Qi, Xiao Yi had passed the first test, which was relatively easy for him. Congratulations on passing our test. Next, we'll begin the real first mission. The black-robed man immediately appeared, taking the somewhat tired Xiao Yi away from the prehistoric world. Tell me, what is the first mission? Xiao Yi asked directly. It's already in your mind. Go and check it yourself, the black-robed man said. Xiao Yi immediately checked it in his mind, and soon his expression gradually changed. This was somewhat similar to the plot of a certain novel. And the title was even called Conquering the Xiangsuan Continent. Go to the Xiangsuan Continent and begin your conquest. At the black-robed man's words, a massive vortex suddenly appeared before Xiao Yi, quickly sucking him in. In the flowing cloud sect of the Xiangsuan Continent, a beautiful woman dressed in a magnificent, gold-embroidered red robe sat in the sect's main hall, impatiently awaiting someone's arrival. Xiao Yi is currently in a critical period of cultivation, so he may not be able to receive Miss Nalan. I am very sorry, the middle-aged man in gray robes on the other side of the table said to the woman in front of him with a respectful bow. Bang! Before the woman could speak, the white-haired old man sitting beside her slammed his hand on the table, looking extremely angry. Susan. Don't think we don't know, that brat Xiao Yi is already crippled. He's just a piece of trash now. Our Miss Nalan wants to see him, so why don't you make him come out now? Can he hide inside forever? The white-haired old man's sudden outburst and extremely insulting words immediately made Susan, the sect leader of the Liuyan sect, lose face, his face turning pale and then red. If it weren't for the fact that the other party was from the Xianyan sect, he would have already beaten them both out of the Liuyan sect. Uncle Xiang, we came here only to dissolve the engagement, is this really necessary? Nalan Ruoxu also felt somewhat uncomfortable with Xiang Ji's behavior. After all, Xiao Yi was once a prodigy, only to suddenly fall from grace. There was no need to push him to this point. Miss, just listen to me. This Xiao Yi is just trying to get away with this. He doesn't know his own limitations. Even in his current state, he's still dreaming of turning a chicken into a phoenix. Although Nalan Ruoxu tried to persuade her, Xiangjie didn't change her attitude at all. Instead, she became even more aggressive. Xiangjie had seen many prodigies, especially fallen young geniuses. They were as numerous as hairs on a cow. A true prodigy is one who can display unparalleled talent at any time, crushing all their peers. But Xiao Yi's current success was just a brief moment of brilliance in his youth. It was merely a flash in the pan. Hey Xiang, don't think you can do whatever you want just because you're from the Xingdian Yun sect. This is the Liu Yun sect, please be more respectful. Su Zun could no longer tolerate Xiangjie's arrogance and disdain. He suddenly stood up and angrily pointed at Xiangjie. Sect Master Su, I understand your anger. After all, your sect's most talented genius has fallen. No one would feel good about that. Unexpectedly, Xiangjie just smiled slightly, but suddenly changed his tone and rebuked, but this is not the reason why Xiao Yi, this good-for-nothing, is hiding and not coming out. Don't think that you can rely on the marriage contract to stay with our Miss Nalan. He should just live a normal life as an ordinary mortal. That's what he should do. Su Zun's clenched fists quietly loosened after hearing these words. Now it's not that Xiao Yi is deliberately not coming out, but that he really can't come out. As a genius, to fall into the life of a mortal overnight is unacceptable to anyone, let alone a hot-blooded young man like Xiao Yi. So yesterday, he forcibly gathered his profound energy, attempting to cleanse his meridians and marrow once more. The result was obvious. Without the support of profound energy, Xiao Yi was utterly unable to withstand the impact of external profound energy. In an instant, he completely lost consciousness. Even today, when Nalan Ruoxu arrived, he remained unconscious. But if you were to tell Nalan Ruoxu and Xiangjie the situation, he would undoubtedly face a barrage of sarcastic remarks. More importantly, they wouldn't believe his explanation. For a moment, Su Zun was also caught in a dilemma. Sect leader Su, stop dawdling. Hand over Xiao Yi quickly. It'll save both of our time. A cultivator's time is precious, don't let my young lady's cultivation progress be delayed. Xiangjie's words were aggressive, leaving Su Zun and Xiao Yi no way out. Since you insist, then fine, I'll take you to find Xiao Yi. Su Zun, barely suppressing his anger, abruptly turned and headed deeper into the inner chambers. Inside the purple orchid painting, Xiao Yi, lying on the bed, showed no sign of waking. In a brief instant, a deafening roar pierced the silent air. Xiao Yi jolted awake, staring blankly at the unfamiliar surroundings. Have I transmigrated? Xiao Yi wondered involuntarily, glancing down at his clothes. Chapter 317 Anger. Having played the game Battle Through the Heavens before, he had some understanding of transmigration. Another scream rang out as Xiao Yi felt a sharp pain in his head, like a waterfall rushing in, the throbbing pain extremely intense. Heaven? Fallen? Mortal? Engagement? A series of incomprehensible words flooded Xiao Yi's mind, leaving him bewildered. Xiao Yi is inside. Go in and talk to him. A very familiar voice came from outside the door. It was Su Zun, bringing Xiangjie and Nalan Ruoxu. Su Zun didn't take another step forward, only gesturing for Xiangjie and Nalan Ruoxu to enter. Once they saw the unconscious Xiao Yi, they would understand the reason for everything. However, they couldn't escape another round of sarcastic remarks. Xiao Yi, hiding here, what good is it? Xiangjie pushed open the door without hesitation and strode into the room. Who? Xiao Yi saw the face that entered the room, his mind filled with confusion. In the memories Xiangjie had just acquired, there was no match for this person yet. However, Nalan Ruoxu, who then entered the room, immediately reminded Xiao Yi of her. Nalan Ruoxu was the personal disciple of the Xian'an sect master, and they had been betrothed when they were young. And now, judging from this situation, Xiao Yi could guess most of it. Damn it, I only transmigrated here after finishing the Battle Through the Heavens game. Is it really necessary for me to follow the same path as Xiao Yan? Xiao Yi was extremely angry at the thought. A genius becoming a waste, annulment of an engagement. These two old clichés actually happened to him. It was unimaginable. Was he really going to repeat Xiao Yan's mistakes here? At this moment, Xiao Yi didn't want to pay attention to the furious Xiao Yi, or the indifferent Nalan Ruoxu behind him. Whether his future path would completely repeat Xiao Yan's was what Xiao Yi should be thinking about right now. Xiao Yi. Stop playing dumb. The annulment letter is here, sign it. Xiangzi threw the annulment letter at Xiao Yi and shouted dismissively. Xiao Yi paid no attention to the white-haired old man before him, instead falling into deep thought. Xiao Yi, don't be stubborn anymore. We're no longer compatible. Signing the papers is best for both of us. And to compensate you, the Cheyenne sect can give you a breakthrough pill and 10 kinds of rare and precious herbs. Seeing Xiao Yi's lack of reaction, Nalan Ruwaksu is worried about her own purity and hurriedly offered all her bargaining chips. Faced with two people chattering like crows, Xiao Yi, annoyed by the noise, could only turn away. Chen Feng was about to continue resolving the matter when he seemed to be suddenly pulled into a vortex. He found this strange and suddenly fainted. He wasn't sure what happened next. But then something else suddenly happened. He felt someone patting him, and looking over in surprise, he saw someone sitting next to him. Still puzzled, the person spoke to him. Where did you come from? Why did you faint here? I saw you suddenly appear here when I came here. This place is very dangerous. The ninjas are fighting right now. You're just an ordinary person, it's best not to stay here. Leave now. Chen Feng was stunned, not understanding what was going on. After saying this, the person seemed to lead him in another direction. Hearing the mention of ninjas, Chen Feng had already suspected he had stumbled upon the Hokage's territory. He thought for a moment and looked at the person again. If it was a fight between ninjas as he described, he was well aware that it could be dangerous. He glanced at them again, considering the situation. Since he was already here, Chen Feng didn't have anything else to do, he just needed to stay and fulfill his duty. He then looked at the man, who seemed to want to pull him away quickly. However, Chen Feng clearly didn't want to do that. He thought about it and looked at him again, stopping himself from going with the man. The man looked at Chen Feng anxiously and said, "What are you doing here? Those ninjas are fighting right now and won't be able to pay attention to us. It's better to escape now. If you want to find out anything else, or why you came here, do it now. We'll come back after their fight is over." Just then, he saw Chen Feng speaking to him. Chen Feng, upon hearing this, smiled at the man again. He could sense that the man was saying these things because he didn't want him to encounter danger here, and that the man's presence here wasn't out of fear. So Chen Feng looked at him for a moment. He thought about it, but decided to figure out how to resolve the situation first. He looked at him, thought about it, and smiled at the man again. Although he was grateful for what he had said, Chen Feng still spoke to him at this moment. "Regardless, I'm grateful you told me all this at this time, but I still need to figure out what's going on. You just said there was a fight between these cage-level figures. What exactly happened? I don't understand what happened, so I still need you to tell me what's going on." The man, hearing this, seemed somewhat anxious. He looked at Chen Feng. Since he had met him here and told him about this, he obviously didn't want Chen Feng to encounter any danger. Therefore, what Chen Feng said made him somewhat anxious. Of course, he still needed to investigate further. He thought about the matter. Since he wasn't willing to escape with him at this time, the only option was to hide with him first. This man was always like this, he liked to do things to help others. That's why he woke Chen Feng up at this moment. Otherwise, if it were someone else, they wouldn't go over there while the ninjas were fighting and someone was lying there. After all, it was such a dangerous situation. He knew very well what those ninjas were thinking if they wanted to hurt him. However, he didn't want to end up like them at this time. So, he looked at Chen Feng again. The village had thought that this person was going to escape at this moment, so he led them in another direction. "I already told you that those ninjas are fighting right now, which is a very dangerous thing. But you insisted on staying here at this time. However, I did see you just now. In that case, I'll take you to another place for now. I won't talk to you anymore now. Just come with me." Then, Chen Feng and his group took him to another location. Chen Feng didn't say anything more to him at this point. Since he wanted to hide with him, they could first observe the fighting among the ninjas and see why they had suddenly started fighting. This was what Chen Feng wanted to understand. The sudden escalation of the fight was indeed strange, so he didn't say anything more and followed the man to another location. Not long after, they saw two groups of ninjas arrive. They all seemed very angry, suddenly turning to look at their enemies, as if they wanted to eliminate them all at once. Chen Feng found this strange. Why were they suddenly so angry? He hadn't seen anyone say much. Just as the person next to him was about to say something, that person suddenly stopped Chen Feng. He didn't want Chen Feng to say anything more. If they started arguing, the matter wouldn't be so easily resolved. So he stopped Chen Feng at that moment, and Chen Feng, Seeing his expression, didn't say anything more. He just looked in that direction again, genuinely wanting to understand what was going on and why these people were fighting like this, though he didn't say it directly. Judging from his current demeanor, since he wasn't telling him, Chen Feng could tell that this person definitely didn't want to talk to him. He just thought about it for a moment, then looked at him again. Although he didn't really understand what he wanted to do, he had a way. Although he didn't understand the situation, he had a way to find out. But just then, the ninjas started fighting again. Chen Feng still didn't know what was happening, but they all seemed very angry. At this moment, the person beside him secretly spoke to him again. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 318 Attack. You're not clear about this matter yet. This was originally a very dangerous situation. Apparently, one of their more skilled ninjas was suddenly eliminated by someone. Both groups of ninjas have had members dismissed, which is why they were so angry. As for who did it, I'm not entirely sure. Chen Feng, upon hearing this, understood. So that's the reason. It seems they weren't just upset about the elimination of their ninjas, they also felt provoked and feared ridicule if they didn't address the issue. That's why they acted this way. After understanding this, Chen Feng wasn't surprised. Their actions were understandable. He looked at them again, but they needed to address their next concerns. Chen Feng also looked at him, initially puzzled by the situation, but now that he'd been told, he wanted to know what was going on. He suspected someone might be deliberately trying to mediate their conflict. So, he looked at the person beside him and said, "Are there many ninjas around here in Jotian? If so, is it possible that someone is deliberately trying to sow discord among them? As for other things, I don't know much. I just arrived here, but seeing how they're fighting now, and remembering what you told me earlier, it's certainly possible, isn't it?" The man glanced at Lu Quan, finding it strange that he was bringing this up. However, he didn't say much more, because he wasn't a particularly strong ninja himself. What he was telling Chen Feng was only what he knew from others. He truly didn't know anything about Chen Feng. So, after hearing his words, he simply looked at him again and didn't say anything more. He was already very grateful that this person was willing to tell him these things, and he had indeed wanted to take him with him when they escaped. Chen Feng was just someone he had met by chance, and his willingness to do so was already quite generous. So he looked at him again at that moment, and thought about the matter. Since he had already told him all this, Chen Feng naturally had to think about how to resolve it. He couldn't just let these people fight until they left. So he said to the man, "Do you think we can stop them from continuing to fight? We can't just wait here for them to finish fighting before we go out. That would seem to take a long time. Why don't we sneak out now or try to stop their fight?" The man looked at Chen Feng with some surprise. How could he have such a thought? He was just an ordinary ninja, not nearly as powerful as those fighting ninjas. Hearing Chen Feng's words, he found it strange that he had such an idea. It was truly a dangerous thing. If it was dangerous for them to hide here and secretly watch them, then Chen Feng's suggestion to go forward and stop them was the most terrifying thing he could imagine. These ninjas were all very powerful, and even though he liked to help others, he wouldn't dare to do such a thing at this time. So, upon hearing this, he looked at Chen Feng. Chen Feng knew very well that this person wouldn't agree to this matter directly, but it wasn't a big deal. Even if he didn't want to agree now, he had ways to make him agree later. Moreover, he did feel that someone might be trying to sow discord between them. Because Chen Feng had just arrived here and hadn't received any missions from the system, he didn't know what he was supposed to do. He could only figure out what he could do at this time, which was why he said this to this person. And then looked at him again and said the same thing. "We're just secretly following them to find out more about this matter. After they fight, we'll secretly go and see if there's anyone around them, or if anyone is deliberately trying to sow discord between them. If so, think about it, once you resolve this, those people will definitely like you." Chen Feng said this to him again. It wasn't that he was deliberately looking for something to do, but rather that he really had nothing else to do right now. Helping these people resolve some issues seemed like a good idea, and he also needed to wait for the system to issue him a new task. After all, he had suddenly arrived in this place, and he felt that being suddenly pulled into that vortex must have been the system's doing, otherwise, it wouldn't have happened. But that's why he had to stay here for now. After all, there must be a reason why the system sent him here. There must be a reason for sending him here, but the system hasn't told him what it is yet. Chen Feng had just tried to talk to the system, but it didn't seem to respond at that moment. So Chen Feng decided to go over there and see what was going on. He decided to go there first and see how to resolve the matter. That's why Chen Feng didn't say much else. He needed to figure out what was going on and what those people were planning. The person who had dragged Chen Feng there and hidden him seemed incredulous upon hearing Chen Feng's words. He clearly couldn't believe Chen Feng would dare to think like that at this time. It was inherently dangerous, not to mention the strength of those people. So he looked at him again. Chen Feng also looked at the man. Although he didn't know what the man was thinking, he could glean some information from his expression. He smiled at him again, thought for a moment, and then spoke to him. I don't have anything else to say to you at this time, but no matter what, you must be careful. We still don't know what's here. Just stay with me. Although I don't have much strength, I can still keep you safe. The person who heard this was stunned. He understood that he had to protect him now. But he had just fainted. Just as he thought of this, the people over there seemed to have noticed someone attacking them. The person was a little wet. He didn't have much strength to begin with. So when they attacked, he thought they were going to be killed. But suddenly, he was pulled away. He looked over in surprise and saw Chen Feng pulling him to the other side. At that moment, Chen Feng blocked the ninja's attack. The ninja was clearly surprised to find someone so powerful here, so he looked over. When he saw Chen Feng, he was quite taken aback. He hadn't expected someone to be hiding here, and even more so, to be fighting him at this time, and seemingly stronger than them. Who are you people? Why are you here at this time? Or are you some kind of traitor who secretly hid here to ambush us? We were wondering why you suddenly agreed to fight us. It turns out you were just planning to have someone sneak up on us. As they spoke, they suddenly looked over there again, this time directly at the ninjas they were fighting. The ninjas were somewhat helpless. They clearly hadn't expected anyone to be hiding here, nor had they anticipated anyone coming at this time. But when they saw Chen Feng and the other person, they realized the ninjas didn't recognize them at all. He felt somewhat helpless about this. But he still needed to find a way to resolve the situation. He looked at Chen Feng again, thought for a moment, and then said to the ninja, whether you believe what I'm saying or not, these people have nothing to do with us. But you shouldn't do anything to harm them right now. They seem completely unaware of what's going on. If you just hurt them like this, it would be too annoying. As for the ninja, he glanced at him and smiled. He didn't care what they thought. Since Chen Feng had suddenly appeared here and made him unhappy, he obviously wouldn't let him go at this moment. So he watched as Chen Feng attacked again. Chapter 319 Defeat. But Chen Feng had already figured out what this person wanted to do, so how could he let him attack him? And what about the person next to him? Just as he was about to attack him again, Chen Feng suddenly made a move and directly blocked the person's attack again, and at this moment, he made him suffer. Then, at this moment, he spoke to him again. We just happened to be here, and you suddenly started fighting. Shouldn't we hide now, or should we just watch you fight, or let you attack us like this? I didn't say anything else earlier because I didn't want any conflict with you. If you continue like this, don't blame me for being impolite. The ninja was stunned. He clearly hadn't expected the Luquan ninja to be so strong. Before Chen Feng made his move, he hadn't even considered that Chen Feng could defeat him. He had sensed Chen Feng's strength just now, that power was beyond his current capabilities. Yet, he felt furious. This ninja dared to injure him so easily. He had just looked at him. The other ninja, who had become their enemy, was also surprised. They hadn't wanted those people to harm Chen Feng. They knew Chen Feng and his group had just happened to be here. Of course, perhaps they hadn't intended to do anything at this time. When that person was about to attack Chen Feng, he even considered stopping them, but he didn't expect Chen Feng to be so strong, defeating the person so easily. Just as they were marveling at this, Yi Shen looked at the person again and said, I've already told you, I'm not one of the people planted here. Don't deliberately provoke me. We just happen to be here. If you dare to do this again, don't blame me for being impolite. I said I'd deal with you, and I can definitely do it. Hearing Chen Feng's words, they were surprised, as they hadn't expected him to speak so directly, without a trace of emotion. That person had a very bad reputation, and many people dared not provoke him. They were only forced into this situation because they had no choice but to fight him. None of them expected Chen Feng to defeat this person and say those things. However, judging from the man's expression, he seemed genuinely angry about it. They found it somewhat amusing. He probably hadn't expected someone so powerful to defeat him so easily. The ninja who tried to ambush Chen Feng was indeed surprised when Chen Feng defeated him. He had initially thought Chen Feng was just a weakling, which was why he had acted this way. He hadn't expected Chen Feng to be so strong, even managing to block his attack so easily. The attack was launched by Chen Feng himself. Although everyone present, including their enemies and the other ninjas, thought he hadn't used any real power to attack Chen Feng, which was why they found it strange, only Chen Feng himself knew the truth. I didn't use too much power just now, just to make you understand some things. What we're doing has nothing to do with you. You'd better go in another direction when you see us and don't stay here, otherwise you'll be punished. He didn't say anything more to Chen Feng at this moment, but Chen Feng could feel that this person was threatening him. He was using what he was saying to threaten him. So Chen Feng just looked at this person again. He thought about it again. Indeed, he didn't have anything to say to him at this moment, but judging from his current appearance, he knew very well that this person looked down on his strength. Chen Feng didn't care too much about what these people were thinking, but being suddenly and inexplicably looked down on like this must have made him very angry. So Chen Feng looked at the ninja again. He could tell the ninja was somewhat afraid. He had said he hadn't used much power, but Chen Feng could sense he'd used some of his strength, only to be caught off guard by Chen Feng's attack. You said you didn't use any force and just defeated me like that? Should I make you think about what you actually did? There are many people here. You need to figure this out first, otherwise, if you get laughed at, I won't care. Hearing Chen Feng's words, the ninja seemed slightly frightened. With so many people around, if anyone told their organization about this, he would definitely be ridiculed, as he had many enemies within their organization. He wasn't without enemies within his own organization, which is why he felt afraid. He glanced at Chen Feng again, but ultimately didn't want Chen Feng to look down on him. So Chen Feng simply looked at the man again, smiled, and said, judging from your current state, you probably think I wouldn't dare do anything to harm you right now. Why don't you try to figure out how to resolve this matter? While I wouldn't dare do anything else to hurt you, you can still resolve it. The ninja became somewhat frightened upon hearing this and looked at Chen Feng again. He knew from Chen Feng's words that this wasn't a joke. Chen Feng had said he would resolve the matter now, and if he had faced Chen Feng in this situation, he truly meant it. That's why he was indeed a little scared at this moment. But when he saw the group, he felt that he couldn't admit defeat to Chen Feng at this time. In short, he couldn't let Chen Feng look down on him like this, otherwise he would be ridiculed by his enemies. So he looked at Chen Feng and said to him, of course, I can fight you, but looking at you now, even though I just fought with them, it's impossible for you to defeat me like this. I just don't know where you're from. If you want to fight me, I need to find out first, right? He said this directly to Chen Feng, and his words made Chen Feng realize something. He knew exactly what Chen Feng wanted to do, find someone he needed help with and then use them to threaten him. That's why he needed to know where Chen Feng came from. Only then could he find out who Chen Feng was using to threaten him. But Chen Feng faced many obstacles. How could Chen Feng not see what this person was thinking? He hadn't said anything earlier simply because he wanted to see what this person was thinking. Now that he knew the truth, Chen Feng had no reason to be polite anymore. He simply looked at the person again and was about to deal with him directly. Since he had already provoked Chen Feng at this point, Chen Feng had no reason to let him go. Otherwise, if he were to bring in other people, this person beside him would truly be in danger. After all, this person had helped him before, and Chen Feng didn't want that to happen again. So, he simply glanced at him again. Because he didn't want this to happen at this moment, he looked at Chen Feng again. Although he didn't know what Chen Feng was planning, he certainly didn't want Chen Feng to be happy about this. So, they wanted to see how Chen Feng was thinking about how to resolve these matters. He glanced at him again, and indeed, as he had thought, Chen Feng's strength was much greater than they had imagined. But now, if they wanted to defeat Chen Feng, they needed to see how Chen Feng understood these things, how he knew what they were afraid of, and how he would resolve it. Chapter 320 Fear. Actually, Chen Feng understood from the ninja's words that he was already somewhat afraid. Otherwise, such a person wouldn't speak to him like that at this moment. Of course, Chen Feng didn't mean anything by it, he was simply afraid. He didn't necessarily want to do anything at this time, but then he saw it. The ninja clearly had an expression of disdain for Lu Xun, and the person next to him was constantly threatening him with his eyes. Chen Feng hated this kind of person the most, so he couldn't let him off the hook. So, he looked at the person again, smiled, and said, "It's true, just as you said. You two were fighting the whole time, while he and I were just staying here. Of course, we couldn't do anything else at this time. If I stayed here and fought you, it might make you unhappy." The man was already furious upon hearing this. He had assumed that Chen Feng would immediately accept his words and cease fighting, as he expected. He hadn't anticipated Chen Feng's words at this crucial moment, especially since they provoked him so much. But what could he do then? Since things had already come to this, he could only glance at Chen Feng again, not intending to say anything more. He simply wanted to avoid further anger. He had assumed that Chen Feng's words would make him accept the situation and stop fighting, but Chen Feng simply smiled at him and then spoke. "Since that's the case, I'll let you go back now. When your strength returns to what it was before, I'll come back for you. Of course, everyone here should also come and see who's stronger, you or me. I hate people who bully others." Actually, Chen Feng didn't fight this person for that reason. His anger stemmed from the look of disdain the other person had given them. He hated people like that and especially hated anyone deliberately looking down on him. That's why he said those things. Then he saw the other person's expression immediately change. He understood why the other person was afraid. If he lost, someone would laugh at him. So, it wasn't surprising that the other person was anxious about it. However, since he had already provoked Chen Feng at this moment, Chen Feng obviously couldn't let him off so easily. So, he simply smiled at him again, and the man's expression changed suddenly. He clearly hadn't expected Mr. Chen to dare say such a thing at this time. He thought that with so many people on their side, since he had said this to Chen Feng would definitely be able to sense that he didn't want to fight him. And with so many ninjas on their side, he had always considered the power to be very strong. No matter what, Chen Feng wouldn't dare to say anything more at this time, but he didn't expect him to say such a thing. Now, everyone here was watching him closely. If he refused Chen Feng's request to fight him at this moment, it would be as if everyone had come out and he was already afraid of Chen Feng. Then even more people would laugh at him, and he obviously didn't want that to happen. He clearly didn't want to encounter this situation at this moment, but he had to do it this way. Otherwise, if those people noticed and he showed fear, they wouldn't just laugh at him. Chen Feng glanced at him again, wanting to see what else this man would say. He could sense the meaning behind his earlier words, but Chen Feng deliberately didn't do as he was told. He wanted to make him angry. It wasn't that he was angry because he had bullied others. He just hated people deliberately provoking him. He also hated people intentionally attacking him. Whenever he encountered such people, if Chen Feng didn't mock them, they would definitely be unhappy. So, Chen Feng looked at the man with a hint of smugness, wanting to see what else he could say. He just glanced at the group again. The man merely glanced at Chen Feng. He could sense that Chen Feng was deliberately provoking him at this moment, but what could he do? Judging from his expression, he knew Chen Feng wasn't going to fight him now. So Chen Feng smiled at him and said, looking at him again, "Why haven't you agreed to my request yet? Are you afraid you won't be able to beat me and will be laughed at? If so, you can just tell me. I don't necessarily want to fight you right now. You just need to admit defeat and promise not to provoke me again, and I'll let you go." Chen Feng did indeed say these words, deliberately trying to provoke him into agreeing. Sure enough, after Chen Feng said these words, the ninja's expression immediately changed. If he didn't agree, it would mean he was genuinely afraid of Chen Feng in front of everyone. However, this wasn't just their group. If it were only their ninjas, he could have instructed his men not to spread the word. But there was another person present, who glanced at their enemies and saw them looking at him smugly. If he refused, they would definitely settle the matter. After Chen Feng spoke to that person, they seemed incredulous. Clearly, they hadn't expected Chen Feng to dare challenge them again. They had spoken to him to force him to stop, but Chen Feng hadn't taken their word seriously and even dared to threaten them. The other person was furious, but he knew he couldn't defeat Chen Feng. Chen Feng's words were a clear provocation. Do you really think your strength is so great that no one can defeat you right now? Let me give you a piece of advice, don't be so arrogant. There are always people who can beat you right now. I don't want to argue with you about this anymore, but don't provoke me any further." He said this to the man, but Chen Feng just smiled. He could tell what the man was really thinking. He was simply too afraid to say anything. So he looked at the man again, pondering the matter. Chen Feng looked at the ninja. He could tell from his expression that the man was genuinely afraid. However, Chen Feng couldn't let him off so easily just because of a few words. He needed to understand some things with everyone, and he was also angry about what these people had done, and what he had just done. Chen Feng wasn't angry because they had bullied anyone else. He wasn't particularly concerned about that matter anyway. His anger stemmed from the fact that the man had deliberately threatened him. That was the reason Chen Feng disliked him so much. So, he looked at him again, smiled, and said, "What do you mean? You said you didn't lose to me because of any other reason, but simply because you didn't use your full strength. Since that's the case, I'll let you reach your peak power and then fight you again. Why are you angry about that?" Chen Feng looked at him and said this, wanting to see what else this man would say. Sure enough, the man's expression immediately changed. He dared not say anything more from Chen Feng now. His words were enough to confirm that he was afraid because of this. Chapter 321 Ninja. If he said anything more at this point, it would only confirm Chen Feng's suspicions. So, he glared at him angrily, genuinely upset about the situation. But there was no other way to resolve it, so he looked at Chen Feng again, not wanting to say anything more. Chen Feng simply smiled at the man. He didn't want to know what the man was thinking at this moment. All he wanted to do was defeat him later. However, he needed to do something else now. He wanted this man to do something for him after losing, which would involve a bet. It was actually quite simple. So, Chen Feng looked at the man again, smiled back, and took a few steps forward. With so many people watching, it was clear this man wouldn't dare admit he was angry because he couldn't beat him. Chen Feng felt a little smug and looked at the man again, but again, he didn't say anything more. He simply approached him again at this moment, and the man, seeing Chen Feng's expression, clearly knew he wanted to do something else, but he couldn't say it directly. He was no match for Chen Feng. It was precisely because of this that Chen Feng spoke to him. "How about we do something else now? I have something I want to discuss with you. I think you're willing to agree to this. As for how to proceed, I'm not entirely sure yet, but I still want to understand it with you first." He looked at the ninja again, knowing that what these people cared about most was how others perceived them. It was precisely because of this that Chen Feng could understand this. So he looked at him again, and then saw that he too had considered the matter. He wasn't entirely sure how to resolve this matter, but there were some things he needed to understand. So, he looked at the man again and thought about the situation. Since Chen Feng wanted to provoke him, he figured he might as well let Chen Feng see what kind of strength the man really had. The man, of course, knew he couldn't beat Chen Feng. But Chen Feng's challenge was being given in front of so many people. If he dared to refuse even slightly, he would be suspected by so many people that he was afraid of Chen Feng. So, Chen Feng continued, "I think it's pointless for us to fight like this. It would only make us look bad. How about we make a bet? Whoever loses has to do something for the other person. Let's see if you dare to agree." Hearing this, the man glared angrily at Yushin. How could he not see that he was deliberately saying this? But since he had already said it in front of so many people, if he didn't agree, they would really think he was afraid of him. So, he could only glance at Chen Feng at this moment. Although he didn't want to agree to this, he had no choice but to agree, otherwise he might be ridiculed. If it were only their own people here, he could ask them not to tell anyone. But there were also ninjas who were now their enemies, and they would definitely tell others. He dared not do that. The man knew very well that he had to agree to Chen Feng's request now, otherwise he would inevitably be ridiculed by everyone here. This wasn't just his own people, there were even his enemies. How could his enemies let him off so easily? So, somewhat resentfully, he glanced at Yushin again. Chen Feng had done all this, but he had no other choice. Since Chen Feng had provoked him, he had to agree. So, even though the man was very angry about this, he could only look at Chen Feng and not accept it. "Since that's the case, where should I find you? Since you've challenged me, do you want to come directly to us now? You can fight our people here then. It all depends on what you think now. Otherwise, I don't want to say anything more to you now." He was really angry about this matter back then, and he didn't even need to concentrate. He also knew very well what he was about to encounter. Since Chen Feng had challenged him at this time, if he couldn't defeat Chen Feng, he would be ridiculed by his own men. Yi Shen smiled at him. Chen Feng could also see how angry this person was and how much he wanted to finish him off at this moment. But no matter what he thought, he couldn't do it. No matter what he did, he couldn't defeat Chen Feng at this moment, so there was no need to think about this matter anymore. So he smiled at this person again and then looked at the other ninja. That person who had been staying here the whole time, seemingly thinking Chen Feng might not be able to defeat him, which was why he stayed. Chen Feng found it strange, but seeing that the person was about to attack him, he seemed to want to help him. So Chen Feng smiled at him and said, "Before my fight with him, could I go to your side first? After all, I'm currently fighting him, and I'm not sure if going there will mean I need to resolve something myself, or if I might encounter any other dangers." As Chen Feng said this, he deliberately glanced at the ninja again. The ninja knew perfectly well that Chen Feng was deliberately mocking him, but what could he do? He couldn't possibly defeat Chen Feng right now, so he could only look at him again. He glanced at Chen Feng again, wanting to resolve the matter, but seeing Chen Feng's current state, he knew Chen Feng wouldn't listen. What could he do then? He could only listen to Chen Feng's words. So, after thinking for a moment, he said to Chen Feng, "If you want to go to his place, you have to see if he's willing to take you in. They don't allow just anyone to enter. So I advise you not to have this idea anymore. Staying here is the only way to avoid danger." He looked at Chen Feng and said this because he was genuinely angry about the matter, especially about Chen Feng's words. He knew very well that the people Chen Feng had mentioned going to the ninja's place would definitely laugh at him after learning about this. However, Chen Feng merely glanced at them again, pondering the matter. Although he wasn't sure what these people were planning, he had other things to attend to. So, after hesitating for a moment, he finally spoke to the ninja. "Since that's the case, I won't say anything more. It's all my own business. I just need to defeat you then. Of course, I don't think you'd be angry about this. If others noticed, they'd definitely find it hilarious." Du Chun deliberately looked at the ninja and said this, then saw that the ninja was furious and almost immediately wanted to pounce on him. However, Chen Feng simply looked at him. He didn't know what the ninja was planning, nor did he want to know. So Chen Feng glanced at him again at this moment. As for the ninja, he was somewhat resentful upon seeing this and left. Of course, he had already made an agreement with Chen Feng about where they would fight next. Chen Feng then saw the ninja who had tried to help him earlier. He thought about it and decided it was best to stay where he was. As for the person who had helped him hide, he couldn't take him there now, because that person might be in danger. So Chen Feng looked at the ninja and said, "It seems I'll have to go to your place to fight you. Please don't mind, because I really don't dare go to his place at this time. Otherwise, I don't know what he might do to harm me. After all, I still have a battle with him, and I don't want to lose to him now." Chapter 322 Domination. The ninja chuckled upon hearing this. He had been genuinely surprised when Chen Feng mentioned going to their side, but considering Chen Feng's earlier conversation with that person, he decided to let Chen Feng come over. After all, it was just helping him out. He figured it was better to help Chen Feng in this matter than for him to be in danger himself, so he smiled at Chen Feng and readily agreed. Chen Feng then looked at the person beside him. He had indeed considered taking him to hide when they encountered danger earlier, so Lu Chunqiu approached him first. He seemed confused as to why Chen Feng had suddenly started fighting with him and what those people wanted to do. However, judging from Chen Feng's expression, he seemed to want to say something. Then the ninja led Chen Feng to their village. He had been genuinely surprised when Chen Feng challenged him, not expecting Chen Feng to do something like this. He had clearly hinted to Chen Feng not to have any conflict with that ninja at that moment, as the situation was inherently dangerous. They didn't know what the ninja was planning, but while he dared not act against them, it was because their village and the ninja's village were of similar strength. He then looked at Chen Feng, thought for a moment, and spoke to him. "You were too reckless to fight him back then. You should have refused him first. Even if he insisted on fighting you, you shouldn't have agreed. It was too dangerous." His strength, regardless of anything else, was still considerable at that time, the ninja said to Chen Feng, clearly believing that Chen Feng couldn't possibly defeat that person. He was somewhat helpless, but didn't understand why they would say anything else. They obviously didn't want to believe Chen Feng's words. However, Chen Feng wouldn't have done this if he couldn't be certain of defeating that person. Since they didn't seem to believe him, Chen Feng felt somewhat helpless, but still smiled and said, "Just believe me for now. Although I don't know how to explain things to you now, I need to understand what you're telling me. I could tell from his words that he definitely has some strength. Hearing this, the ninja felt even stranger. Yi Shen clearly knew that the person was indeed powerful, so why was he doing this at this time? Why was he fighting that person at this moment? He thought about it again and then looked at Chen Feng. Since you've already realized he's a capable person, why fight him now? You should know how dangerous this is, so why do it now? If danger arises, how do you plan to resolve this? He glanced at Yi Shen, who was speaking to Chen Feng, and just smiled. He wasn't particularly concerned about the matter, his words were merely meant to make Chen Feng a little more cautious. Chen Feng then replied, "Didn't you say back then that I was too reckless? That's just how I am. I don't like people threatening me with words at times like this," and yet, he did just that. Regardless of Yi Shen's strength, he just wanted to make him unhappy. You probably saw how angry he was back then. Chen Feng didn't yet know the other person's true strength, or whether he could suddenly become stronger, so he didn't tell him directly that he could defeat him. He couldn't reveal something he wasn't certain of, he simply glanced at the person again. The ninja, hearing this, also looked at Chen Feng. Although he wasn't sure how to explain the situation. Chen Feng had already done what he was told, so he could only listen to Chen Feng and deal with the matter first. He didn't say anything more. Since that's the case, you can stay here for now. The person who is with you is in our neighboring village. He's just an ordinary person, but if you want to see him, you can tell me now, and I'll take you there. I think he seemed a little worried about you. Do you want to go see him? Chen Feng pondered the matter for a moment. He still felt it was a good time to discuss it with him. As for what to do next, he wasn't entirely sure, but he figured it was time to talk to that person. Besides, the person he was with was someone he was worried about being dragged away by, and might become angry and try to supervise him. He thought about it, smiled at him, and although he couldn't say much more, he still followed him in that direction. He followed him again, because there were things that needed to be resolved. He looked around and thought about it, still unsure how to tell him, but he still spoke to this person. In that case, I'll trouble you to take me there first. I'm also afraid of that ninja, because I defeated him back then, and because of this incident, he's involved with me. He did help me with some things when I came here, and I don't want him to be in danger. Hearing Chen Feng say this, the ninja smiled at him and told Ruchuan that he would immediately prepare to take Chen Feng there. Chen Feng greeted him but didn't say anything more. He had already said he was willing to take Ruchuan there. He then led the ninja to Lucheng City because there were some things that Chen Feng needed to resolve. As for whether these things were dangerous, only Chen Feng could decide. And then there was the ordinary person, who had indeed encountered Chen Feng at this time. Meeting Chen Feng at this moment was indeed a somewhat helpless situation for him. He was just an ordinary person, yet he might encounter such danger. He felt a sense of helplessness about this situation. Chen Feng decided to stay in this place for now. Although he didn't know what was going on here, he felt it was okay to stay for a while. However, he needed to think about how he got here before figuring out how. While he was in the place the ninja had arranged for him, he pondered how to resolve these issues. He had suddenly arrived here, and had just offended this person. Clearly, these problems couldn't be solved by simply thinking about them. Why isn't the system saying anything now? I didn't receive any notifications when I arrived. Why are you ignoring my reminders and suddenly disappearing? Shouldn't you have told me about this before resolving these issues? You need to tell me where I am now. Chen Feng was somewhat helpless about this situation. The system had suddenly sent him here, mainly to help him figure out where he was. He had been in one place before, and now he was suddenly here, not even knowing where he was. The system hadn't given him any response. He was wondering if the system had suddenly decided not to help him anymore. But just as he was thinking this, he suddenly received a message from the system. He was initially stunned, but then felt relieved, accepting that the system had helped him discover something. The system told him what he needed to know, such as his current location. When he heard the word ninja, he had already suspected that he might have arrived in the world of Naruto. Sure enough, the system confirmed that he had indeed arrived in the world of Naruto, and then issued a notification. Chapter 323 Mysterious Man. Go to another village to find the person who helped you before, and help them transform from an ordinary person into ninja. This is a basic mission issued by the system. After completing the mission, you will receive energy from the system and can find certain things in the Naruto world to help the system upgrade, making it stronger. Chen Feng was stunned when he heard this. He hadn't expected that there were such things in the Naruto world, but since the system had already said so, he hesitated about how to resolve his problems. As for the person the system mentioned who helped him before and transformed him from an ordinary person into a ninja, he knew without a doubt that it was that person. However, he didn't know that person's name. After thinking for a moment, he decided to ask the system about it, since he didn't know who the person was. If you want me to find someone at this time, I need to know who that person is. I can't possibly go to every village around here and search for them at this time. And I don't even know their name. How am I supposed to get someone to tell me where they are? Chen Feng said this to the system. But what the system told him only made him feel more helpless. He hadn't learned anything from that person yet, and the system couldn't tell him either. It felt like the system had become useless since he came to this world. Of course, Chen Feng didn't think that just because the system didn't want to tell him, he couldn't find that person. He remembered what the ninja had told him before, that he could take him to find that person. But turning him from an ordinary person into a ninja at this time was definitely not something that could be done easily. But Chen Feng was no ordinary person. He wanted to resolve something at this moment, and he was determined to do it by any means necessary. So, after a moment's thought, he went out to find the ninja and find out where the person who had helped him was. Meanwhile, the ninja was finding this rather strange. He had been wondering if Chen Feng was unwilling to meet the ordinary person when Chen Feng arrived. However, he had just escorted Chen Feng to his assigned lodgings, so he assumed Chen Feng was dissatisfied with the situation. He wasn't angry about the matter. He was usually easygoing and didn't dwell on such things. As long as it didn't harm the villagers, he wouldn't get angry. So, he smiled at Ruo again, thinking that if Ruo wasn't satisfied, he could arrange another place for him. But Chen Feng just looked at him again. He didn't understand what the man was thinking. He just wanted to find the person who had helped him in this community. Although you might not have been able to help him, he said to him, I'm really sorry to come here to bother you at this time. I have something to tell you. Of course, if you don't want to help me, it's not a big deal. But this is something I really need you to tell me now. Please don't mind that I suddenly came to find you. Now that Chen Feng needed his help, he naturally wanted to avoid making Chen Feng dislike him at this moment. The ninja, hearing this, smiled at Ruishan again. Although he wasn't sure what Chen Feng wanted to do here, since he had already said so, he couldn't possibly get angry about it. So, he absolutely couldn't get angry, he had to resolve the matter properly. Moreover, he already thought Chen Feng was indeed very capable, but he hadn't been too arrogant at this moment. He also felt that he could help him in this situation. He looked at Chen Feng, thinking about what he should say, and smiled at him, pondering what Ruishan wanted to say. Chen Feng then returned to his residence, which had been arranged for him by the benevolent person. Speaking of which, Chen Feng didn't know what that principal was called. He thought about it and decided that next time he saw him, he would definitely ask him about it, since he couldn't just leave him uninvited forever. At this moment, he pondered why the system had suddenly sent him to this place. He thought about it again, but didn't say anything more. Just then, the system suddenly spoke to the girl again. A new system task had been received: find the person who would help you and help them become a strong person as soon as possible. The condition was that the system could be upgraded, and the person with the system would receive more benefits. However, be careful, as there are other people with systems here, and there's a high possibility of conflict. Chen Feng was stunned when he heard this. What did it mean that there were other people with systems here? They had never mentioned this before. It meant that he not only had to fight these people, but he might also encounter danger. Chen Feng's expression immediately changed. He didn't want to encounter these things at this time, but from what the system was saying, it was clear that he would indeed have to fight. Chen Feng had never thought about these things before, and his expression immediately became serious. He hadn't thought much about it. He was surprised to learn that there were other people with systems in this place. But since it had already happened, he had to understand it from the system first. So he just thought about it again. Chen Feng decided to first understand what it meant to be here, and that others also had systems. He needed to figure out how to resolve things if he had to fight those people. So he spoke to the system again. You want me to find that person and make him very powerful. I know you mean it. I'm already going to find someone. You can't just give me this task because of what happened. These things are dangerous. What do you want me to do? Chen Feng showed anger at this moment because he had never been told that there were other people with systems in this place. He thought about it and his expression changed. The system just thought about it again. Li Wang, or rather, he only reacted briefly at this moment and understood what Chen Feng meant. Of course, the system didn't seem to understand, nor did it know why Chen Feng was angry about this matter. He had done things that involved fighting with others before, but now the system was still telling Chen Feng, just do the tasks the system has issued at this time, and if you don't defeat the enemy at this time, to defeat an enemy who also possesses a system, those who also possess systems will also encounter danger at this time. Please complete the mission as soon as possible. Chen Feng was stunned when he heard this. He hadn't expected there to be such a connection. He never imagined that today's events would be due to something like this. Of course, he wanted to resolve these matters at this time, but how could he possibly resolve this situation? He thought again that he needed to figure out how to resolve this matter. Now that the system had told him that there were other people with missions. Because other people possessed systems and were going to fight at this time, it meant that they needed to obtain something. But what exactly was it? Chen Feng thought about this again. Of course, he was only thinking about whether he could figure this out now. He wasn't entirely sure. He didn't intend to use other methods to get the reporter to tell him, he just needed to think about how to resolve this matter himself. So, at this moment, he thought about the system. He didn't know exactly what was going on, but Chen Feng hadn't told him to say much at this time. Other systems were definitely not going to tell him anything at this point, which made him feel somewhat helpless. But what could he do? After all, he relied on the system to solve many things for him now. Thinking about this, Chen Feng felt helpless, but the most important thing was to figure out what he needed to compete with that mysterious person who also possessed a system 4. He then thought that it would be a good time to ask the system about this matter, but whether the system was willing to tell him, he didn't know. Chapter 324 Destruction. Since you said you'd use me for this mission, you have to tell me what the mission is all about, and what exactly this other person with a system is. You need to explain all of that to me now, right? Chen Feng said to the system. He was actually quite frustrated with the situation. He never imagined he'd have to impulsively interact with something else at this point, especially since there were other people with systems. He had always thought that wherever he went, there were only people like him with systems, but this time it was clearly different. However, the system didn't give Chen Feng any further information. Yi Shen, thinking the system was up to something again, was really angry. But he decided that no matter what the system thought, he had to find out what was going on. He had to understand this situation from the system, because he was in danger, and he couldn't just deal with it haphazardly. So he started thinking about how to resolve the situation. No matter what Chen Feng said, the system seemed to have no answer. Chen Feng hesitated for a moment, wondering why he had encountered this situation here. When he came to this world, he hadn't had any time to consider his own thoughts before being brought here. Chen Feng thought about it again. He found it all very strange. What was going on? Why were there suddenly other systems and other people with systems here? This puzzled him, and he wanted to figure it out. He genuinely didn't understand what the system meant by what it had told him, what it meant that he had to fight others to resolve the situation. Of course, Chen Feng understood the situation, but he hadn't thought about it since meeting the system. He thought about it again and suddenly said to the system, "Are you going to tell me how to find out who these people are? And why do some people have systems? You have to let me know who these people are. If you don't tell me, I won't do this, and I won't do the task you gave me." Actually, Chen Feng was only saying these things because he was a little angry. He thought that if he said these things now, the system might tell him the truth if it was afraid he wouldn't do it. But unexpectedly, the system's voice suddenly rang out again, and then the system said to him, "Please don't threaten the system at this time. This is a task required by the system. If you can't complete the task, you will be stuck here indefinitely, going back to the beginning of the task each time, until this task is completed." Chen Feng became even angrier when he heard this. No matter what he said before, the system wouldn't cooperate. Now that he was threatening the system, everything was about to be revealed to him. But Chen Feng really didn't want to say anything more to the system at this time. He felt that the system was useless to him. Moreover, from what the system said, it seemed that if he couldn't defeat those monsters, he would really be in danger. Of course, he didn't want that to happen, but no matter what, this matter needed to be resolved now. He thought about it and hesitated because of this. He hesitated because of this matter, wondering how to resolve it. He pondered the situation, and then remembered his earlier request to the system to find out who possessed other systems. He realized he might receive the message. Your request, he explained, is that I need to fight other system users to find out who is likely to win. In other words, it's not just your system here. Other systems exist elsewhere, and they also need to find me and fight me. The system confirmed this, making Chen Feng even more frustrated. He was already frustrated by the task of turning an ordinary person into a powerful ninja, and now he had to do all this again. He was truly angry and didn't want to help the system anymore, but he had no choice. However, he also knew very well that the system dared to force him to do this at this moment because it could threaten him. What else could he do at this time? He could only do as the system said. Thinking of this, he was really angry. But he didn't want to say anything more to the system at this moment. But at this moment, he suddenly remembered that he was suddenly brought to this place, but he didn't want to fight with other people with systems at this time, because he couldn't figure out how powerful the system he encountered was. When you brought me into this place, you didn't let me know what I was going to do. When you first let me enter these places and use the system mission, you told me that I should understand everything myself. So you didn't let me realize that you brought me to this place. Chen Feng suddenly received this message from the system. The system seemed to pause slightly at this moment, as if it was thinking about something. After thinking about it, it seemed to decide to help Chen Feng in some way. The system remained silent at this moment. Chen Feng wondered if bringing him to this place was intentional, as he knew Chen Feng hadn't been willing to follow its instructions. Since that was the case, Chen Feng decided not to say anything more. He figured he'd just stay here for now. He didn't want to go anywhere else. As for the system's suggestion to stay, Chen Feng felt it was fine. He was strong enough that even if he became an ordinary person, he hadn't offended anyone here. He could deal with that person later. But then, he suddenly heard the system's voice. After discussing this matter, we realized we couldn't get your consent. We brought you here because our system couldn't resolve this issue. Therefore, we can't let you be in danger. That's why we're willing to help you resolve this. Then, Chen Feng was suddenly given something by the system. Yi Shen was delighted when he saw it, because what the system was giving Chen Feng was information about people who possessed other systems. In other words, Chen Feng knew more than those people about where they came from and what systems they possessed. The details related to their abilities weren't that extensive, but Chen Feng was still very happy about this. Knowing these things would be a great help when he fought against those systems. Thinking about this made him even happier, and he smiled. Chen Feng had initially found this person strange. Why was this person here when there were still things he didn't understand? He looked at him again, but then remembered the mission the system had mentioned. He needed to get to these places immediately and find the ninja first. What Chen Feng can learn from the system now is that he can obtain information about people who possess systems, but he can't directly find out who that person is. So he's somewhat helpless, but this is the best the system can tell him, and Chen Feng is very clear about this. If you can complete the tasks the system gives you now, you can obtain more information about other people with systems when you solve them. However, if you can't complete the tasks, some information about you might be revealed to other system-wielding individuals. Chen Feng recognized this at first, then felt helpless. But he couldn't care less about that now, he just needed to find that ninja. He didn't want to stay in this world any longer, and there was another reason he needed to solve these tasks. This was related to what the system had told him earlier. Besides giving him hints, some ordinary players also told Chen Feng something. Among these people with systems, one possessed a destruction system. This meant that if he won, this place would be destroyed by him. Chapter 325 Ninja. Chen Feng was at a loss for words upon hearing this. How could they set up such a system at this time? But since he had heard about it, he had to deal with it first. After all, someone had helped him when he first arrived. He needed to find the ninja and learn more about the situation. I want to see where the person who helped me is right now. I haven't looked for them since I arrived, and I want to thank them. Please don't mind if you take me with you, I would be very grateful, he said to the ninja. The ninja simply smiled. In his opinion, Chen Feng's desire to know about this wasn't a big deal. So he looked at Chen Feng again, smiled, and then looked at him again as he spoke. Since that's the case, I won't say anything else at this time. You just need to go there now. I'll take you there now, but you have to wait for me to take care of things here first. Otherwise, if I take you there directly, No one can solve these problems. Chen Feng smiled at him upon hearing this. Regardless, he was still grateful for this matter. After all, he had already told him these things, and he was willing to take him there. Therefore, Chen Feng prepared some things and was about to go find that person's location. The person had also finished dealing with his own problems. He came to find Chen Feng and saw that Chen Feng was already a bit anxious about this matter. He found it strange that Chen Feng suddenly wanted to go there at this time, as he hadn't been interested in it before. However, he thought that Chen Feng might have encountered something and had to find that person. So he took him there. While taking Chen Feng there, he happened to encounter the person with whom Chen Feng had agreed to fight. He found this person. He seemed very angry about something, which Chen Feng found strange. Just as the benevolent man was about to step forward to find out the truth, the ninja who had stopped him was puzzled. Why was Chen Feng stopping him at this moment? Chen Feng didn't say anything, but simply pulled back the person next to him. He looked at the person next to him, who also seemed anxious about something. Looking at the person who had been stopped, the ordinary person who had helped Chen Feng was still puzzled. What was going on? But judging from the situation, it seemed that the ninja had bullied him. Chen Feng hadn't actually expected this. He hadn't thought of coming here to find this person because he thought that no matter what, the ninja should be a ninja, and wouldn't do such a thing as bullying others. He didn't expect that when he arrived, the person had already done so. Of course, Chen Feng was surprised that he would do such a thing. But besides being surprised, he was even angrier. Did this kind of person deserve to do such a thing? He then thought about how to resolve the situation. After all, the whole matter wasn't as simple as it seemed. Clearly, many problems were slowly emerging, causing things to become complicated. Chen Feng thought about it for a moment, then looked at the people around him. He didn't say much more at this point, but instead focused on what the person had told him. Could you please tell me what happened? How did that ninja get here? Or did the person beside him do something to offend him? If so, please tell me. I'll see if I can help that person. They had clearly seen that the person beside Chen Feng was also a capable individual and considered the matter. This person was always willing to help others, and many people here liked him and didn't want to see him suffer. Hearing Yi Shen and the others' words, the people here hesitated. Of course, some people were afraid that the person who told Chen Feng about this would also harm them at this time. However, remembering that person's past help, they felt they couldn't do such things no matter what. They still wanted to tell Chen Feng now, hoping he could help that person. Chen Feng looked at them again and thought about how to resolve the situation. He didn't really understand what was going on, but seeing their arguments, he couldn't help but wonder what they wanted. He hadn't seen this situation often, and witnessing it now was surprising. Not everyone adapts well. Chen Feng pondered for a while. It seemed they wanted to resolve something at this time, yet they came to find this person. Chen Feng could learn something from them. Judging from their expressions, they wanted to know his weaknesses. So Chen Feng just smiled, ignored the ninja's obstruction, and went to the other ninja. Judging from your appearance and what you just said to him, you seem to be trying to learn about me from him. Since I'm already standing here, why don't you just explain things clearly? What exactly do you want to know right now? Please tell me everything now. Seeing Chen Feng suddenly appear, the man was quite startled. After all, Chen Feng had appeared out of nowhere. He was certain Chen Feng couldn't possibly be here, so how did he get here? The person who had led Chen Feng aside was also surprised to see him. He clearly hadn't expected Chen Feng to appear so suddenly. Chen Feng actually wanted to help them, but this wasn't something that could be easily resolved. He simply looked at them, smiled at them, and then spoke to them directly. I didn't want to get involved right now, but I came here to see my friend and saw you harming him because of me. If I don't come out and find out what you're trying to do, am I just going to let you do these things? Chen Feng didn't care that there were so many people around and just said it directly. The ninja ring's expression wasn't very pleasant. After all, now that Yi Shen had said these things, he would definitely be laughed at by these people, and he felt somewhat helpless. However, this matter needed to be resolved at this time, and he didn't know how to explain it to them. He could only look at Chen Feng again. He wanted to say something else to change their minds, but Chen Feng's expression and what he had just said made them believe it. Even if he was angry, what could he do? He could only do as Chen Feng said. He felt helpless about this situation. He was indeed helpless, so he looked at him again. After thinking about it, he realized he needed to resolve this matter now, Otherwise, how could he do these things at this moment? Then he saw Chen Feng smile at him. What do you mean? I just wanted to find out where you went. After all, our battle is about to begin, and I was afraid you might have secretly run away. How did it become me threatening your friend? Chen Feng laughed again upon hearing this. The man who came out obviously dismissed Chen Feng, and with that laugh, he dared not say anything more to Chen Feng. He just looked at him again. He really didn't know how to explain this matter, but from Chen Feng's expression, he understood something. Just from Chen Feng's current expression, he already knew something. Chen Feng really wanted to finish him off right now. Although he couldn't explain why he was hesitating, he was still trying to figure out how to explain things to him. Chen Feng then looked at him again. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.